You're listening to the Hard 90 podcast through Acquired Radio at Hofstra University. Now here are your hosts, Tim Crowley, Will Thompson, and Joshua Lindenberg.
Hello, everyone, and welcome inside episode 50 of the Hard 90 podcast through Acquired Radio at Hofstra University. I'm Tim Crowley, joined by the guys who have been here since the beginning, Will Thompson, Josh Lindenberg. Guys, what a milestone we have reached here on Hard 90, episode 50. It's been a long time coming, and I am so excited to finally be here.
Yay, episode 50. Love to see it. Come a long way. Super appreciative to everyone who's been here with us along the way. And we're not just going to talk about the fact that it's episode 50. We got some content coming your way for episode 50. You're not just going to hear us jabbering about how great episode 50 is, because we have other people to do that for us.
That we do, and it's going to be an awesome episode that we have again. You know, this is still, to some extent, a podcast, so we do have to talk about some baseball stuff. And luckily, the baseball gods have blessed us again, as they did for episode 1 and gave us a whole scandal to talk about when we started the show back in November of 2019. Here we are with another blockbuster trade that we're going to discuss coming up here on episode 50. But before we get into that, it's been a long time coming, as we said. There's been almost 60 hours of content recorded through this podcast, but we're not going to make you listen to all that. I don't even know if we could listen to all 60 episodes, all 60 hours of this again. What we do have to listen to is 49 episodes in 16 minutes. So let's take a listen to the first 49 episodes of the Hard 90 podcast.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to the first episode, the first episode of the Hard 90 podcast here through Acquired Radio at Hofstra University. I'm Tim Crowley, joined by my friends Will Thompson and Josh Lindenberg. We're going to be talking all things baseball, and what a better time to start than the time where you guys need your baseball news the most, the off season.
Yep, we are going to dive into our Hall of Fame ballots. As you may or may not know, the ballot was introduced, I believe, about roughly 10 days ago. So we're going to dive into what our Hall of Fame ballots would be. I think you have a This Day in Baseball.
Yes, I do. We're going to start a new segment today, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be called This Day in MLB History.
No Latham starters in their outings. And Garrett Cole is certainly, the top prize on the market. Never alone, if you asked a team, hey, you're a contender, who's the ace that you would probably pick right now? They'd probably say Garrett Cole.
And that's what the Astros did, and why what Jim Crane did was so important, because not only did he just fire them, but he almost forced the hand of John Henry in Boston, and he forced the hand of the Wilpons with the Mets. He forced their hand, and they would have looked very bad if they would have kept them, if those guys would have kept their jobs after this.
Other team, because they haven't named any other teams besides San Diego.
Okay, guys, I'm sorry I have to interrupt. Jeff Passan breaking: the Los Angeles Dodgers have agreed to a deal with the Boston Red Sox that would send outfielder Mookie Betts and starter David Price to the Dodgers. Sources familiar with the deal tell ESPN. Deal is pending medical reviews. It sounds like the deal is pretty much done. I'm not sure when we're going to know the medicals, but yeah, that happened.
So it's done. Mookie Betts,
unbelievable,
heading a deal, is a Los Angeles Dodger.
In September, with 40-man rosters and a zillion pitchers in the bullpen, going batter by batter from the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th innings, probably a bad thing.
That's not a thing, though. We're talking about from the 7th inning on that this is an issue. Guest host of the week.
With the glasses on.
With the glasses on.
Which you all at home can definitely, you can feel the wrath of the sunglasses. You can feel the presence
of my sunglasses on at 6 o'clock at night.
Very honored to have our first guest on the show today. He is the host of MLB on Fox pregame show, as well as MLB Whip Around. Kevin Burkhardt joining us. Thank you, Kevin, for joining us today.
Yeah, of course, Tim. Glad to be with you guys, man. I'm a firm believer in you gotta find your niche in this business and be you. Because people will hire you for you. They're not hiring you to emulate somebody else. So I've always stayed true to that. Some people obviously don't love you, but then hopefully enough people do. And I've been lucky enough where people have enjoyed my work to the point where I am right now. So I think you have to stay to yourself, man.
It was the day of a certain fight between the Red Sox and
Yankees.
Veritek
and A-Rod.
So that's not the question, but yes.
What? I raised my hand!
But that wasn't the question.
No one answered it.
Realizing that those very cheap Paw Sox ponchos that keep you dry on those rainy April and May days actually could convert to PPE letters that we didn't know 2 months ago that now are part of our vocabulary for hospital personnel.
Back with another special guest on today's episode, a former highly regarded prospect of the Boston Red Sox, Lars Anderson, joins us. Lars, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be here. If I keep playing well, like, this attention is not going to go away.
Opportunities where I get to, interact with fans like on a personal level, I think is important, because, or not even important, it's just really cool experience for like everybody involved.
And Will, we're getting baseball back in
That's
some
right.
capacity.
That is right, Tim. Usually I enter the show and I say there's no baseball yet, but today there is baseball. Not the type of baseball we're used to, and it may be starting at 1 a.m., but that's okay because there's now baseball.
Javik Blake joins us. Javik, thank you so much for coming on. We cannot wait to talk some ball with you.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
The newest voice of the Orioles radio network, their play-by-play man for 2020, Jeff Arnold joins us. Jeff, thank you for joining us.
Hey guys, happy to be here. Somebody like an Anthony Santander, trying to get them as many at-bats as possible. And for the Orioles, it's figuring out who is going to be a part of our future and who is not.
Came out and there was like probably 7 or 8 of us because it was a Sunday night game. Like I said, it was like 12:10 a.m. Felt like about 4 a.m. and he said, we're going to have an official announcement, but because word's starting to leak out already, we want to let you guys know that we parted ways with Dave.
And all I can tell you, fellas, I walked out of the broadcast booth when the game was over and my hands were shaking. And they weren't shaking because it was a great game. They were shaking because I discovered what it was that I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
Basically, we'll have to win the rest of their games. And, sure enough, they went out and won 14 out of 15 in the regular season, to get to the postseason. It was a miraculous run. I still believe, had it occurred in New York, where you guys are situated, where I'm from, if it occurred in Los Angeles or Chicago, they'd still be celebrating that run as one of the greatest of all time.
So when did you know that broadcasting was really going to be a passion for you? And kind of take us through what it's like on your journey to where you are behind the mic in the Bay Area today.
Do you have about 5 hours, Tim? Well, as it was documented in the movie, they had to make a lot of changes in the offseason after 2001 when they had a great club, and Derek Jeter messed that up with a flip in the third game of the ALDS at the Coliseum.
The Astros essentially got away with it. Is appalling. When you look at it, you know what? If the Astros are getting away with it, I say throw every person that's ever put a steroid in their butt into the Hall of Fame.
And he said, Jim Lucas, are you up for a challenge? Would you broadcast baseball with a blind man? And I thought in that moment, here I am, my third year. There's 17 guys at the station. I'm getting 1 or 2 games a season.
Hey.
I'm not going over there. And here's a guy that has the instant passion that I had for it. And I thought, I just said, yeah.
We're joined by a very special guest today. The newest undrafted free agent signing of the Boston Red Sox, Jose Garcia, joins us. Jose, thanks for coming on and welcome to Boston.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys once again for having me, and I'm super excited. I can't wait.
And we're with another very special guest today, the former closer at the University of Tampa and now recent undrafted free agent signing of the Boston Red Sox, Jacinto Arredondo Jr. joins us. Jacinto, thanks for coming on and welcome to Boston.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you for taking me in with open arms, too. That's love.
And when Shohei hit his first home run at Angel Stadium to right center field, that's the first thing that came to mind. It was more like like I said, a sign of respect of, here's this guy that's coming over from Japan with the weight of the world on his shoulder, the expectations of everybody in a completely different country. And here he is performing at the highest level. And for me, it was more like a tip of the cap. That's why I said it. And I think after I said it, I kind of freaked out because I was worried about whether or not I was going to be offending a whole country. As
build-up that I talked about, it wasn't like it was May in a nothing game. It was the deciding game of a playoff series when he did it. I mean, I didn't even know he did it in the moment. He swings and I'm watching the ball. I didn't see it till replays that he did it.
I still keep in contact with them. I feel like I'm the old man that says, back in 2008, those guys were tremendous. But it was the case. I mean, they were such good guys to be around, and they were so good on the field. The locker room, the clubhouse was great.
So we're assuming Boyd, Turnbull, Fulmer are locked in as your 1, 2, 3. What's a better 4-5? Matt Manning, Tariq Skubal, Casey Mize, is any of those options? Or Ivan Nova, Daniel Norris, and freaking Jordan Zimmerman?
When I talk about the Angels not getting back to the playoffs, in no way is that Mike Trout's fault. There is literally nothing more he can do. You talked about, he can't pitch the ball. You're sounding a lot like Gisele Bündchen after the Super Bowl 46, talking about her husband Tom Brady. Oh, well, my husband can't throw and catch the ball. Talking about Wes Welker and the huge drop. Yeah,
I had no idea that.
You didn't even realize that reference, did you? And it only took 28 episodes, but let's actually talk about some actual baseball games. That should be a problem.
It's been an average pitcher in the postseason.
He's been below average. The average?
Let's look at the stats. You're telling me what is a 4.43 ERA to you, and what is like
below average? 4.43 is below average.
I'm really happy for Mitch Moreland. Sox made a great move, extending Mitch Moreland's contracts. So hope the performance by Moreland keeps up and pays off big time.
The Yankees, they're being successful because their team chemistry is also good. That's one of the reasons. Also, because they're doing great on the field.
You're up big. Why are you swinging through extending a lead? Well, here's the problem with that. Baseball is not like other sports where, if you're up 49-0 in football, you can control not scoring another touchdown. You can control that. When you swing a bat, you can't control where that ball's going. How would they make their team better? Well, they addressed an area that they could certainly use some help, and that is in the starting rotation with a lot of young guys, but looking for that number one veteran, that true ace, to lead them into the playoffs. And did they get that in Mike Clevenger coming over from the Cleveland Indians?
Imagine being the Tampa Bay Rays, having a ton of injuries of their own, and still continuing to win game after game, maybe in a spot that they're currently in, being the number one seed in the American League, and congratulations, you get a healthy Yankees team in the first round of the playoffs in a best of 3. Boy, can you just imagine how tough of a draw that would be for the Rays to get?
But it's going to look a little bit like this. The National League Division Series going to be held in Arlington, Texas, at the home of the Rangers. You are going to be also having games in Houston at Minute Maid Park, home of the Astros. So both of the NLDS series going to be held in the state of Texas. The same can be said for the ALDS, with this time going out to California, with a series being played in San Diego and a series being played in Los Angeles before you get to the ALCS, which will be permanently at Petco Park, and the NLCS in Arlington, Texas, before both teams converge as league champions in Arlington, Texas for the World Series.
That was fast. That's what I'll say. You think about 60 games and you're like, all right, well, I'll get some baseball in. You don't realize how fast that goes, man. This is quick.
We're about 25 hours away from first pitch to begin the 2020 Major League Baseball playoffs, and I don't know if you could be more excited. But guys, we are through the first round of the playoffs. The Wild Card Series providing plenty of excitement, plenty of memories last week, and here we are. We're officially, it's bubble season in Major League Baseball. Each of the teams left heading into the Division Series have entered their respective bubbles, with play starting tonight in the American League. Going to be a very fun week, and very interested to see how baseball is going to operate in the bubble. As we are here to preview the American League and National League Championship Series today. Feels like this postseason is going by very fast, but also recapping last week what we saw in the Division Series. Welcome to episode 40, and welcome to the World Series, with the Los Angeles Dodgers currently leading the series 3-2 and 1 win away from the World Series championship.
I'm with you, Will. I'm not a huge fan of the narrative. I understand that it's there for a reason, but I think Clayton Kershaw deserves better than what the narrative has given him. That being said, he hasn't always performed well in the postseason, and I understand why people have that description of him in the playoffs. However, this season was different in that Clayton was healthy. He didn't have as much wear and tear on his arm.
Him and Bieber were a very clear 1-2, and I think that they voted for Abreu because of the RBIs, because the White Sox are a fun story, and they are a fun story. But I don't think that should have anything to do with awards or anything like that, unless you want to throw like comeback player of the year into the mix, which I guess you could. But I think that it was kind of an absurd voting, and I usually have multiple awards that I very much disagree with from the writers. wasn't as bad this year, although I think there were a lot of obvious candidates. This one is one that I just don't understand it. I don't get it at all. Abreu had a great season. There's not a chance that would have sustained, and I think that I think you'll see him start to return to earth next year, and I think you'll see Jose Ramirez continue to play like the superstar that he is.
And I just wanted to be a part of it. I didn't know it would lead me to a career path. I really did not. Like I said, you just don't see that coming. I was just happy to be a part of the organization and assist it in its rise as best as I could with whatever resources that I had, and of course, whatever expertise I had in areas of, at that time, marketing, PR, those kinds of things, to help the museum.
Another undrafted free agent signing of the Boston Red Sox, Cole Milam, joins us. Cole, thanks for coming on, and congrats on signing with Boston.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Another undrafted free agent signing of the Boston Red Sox, Cuba Best, joins us. Cuba, thanks for coming on, and congrats on signing with Boston.
Yeah, hey, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
That game, I will literally never forget. And I think, like, with that game, it was just so poetic again for the Rays. And you know what's interesting about it is a lot of people, when they talk about the World Series now, they still talk about that game. And I'm like, the Dodgers won the World Series. Have you noticed that? I mean, we don't really talk about the Dodgers that much winning the World Series. I mean, because the focus after that went to all this other stuff with the Dodgers, right?
The first session, they were just there like puppies waiting to be fed. They were fantastic. So they've embraced it. Now we've got to get them that they just find him as a teammate and get help off him, or they don't even need help off him. You know, if you saw him and Rachel work, and I'm sure you've seen it before, it's a new hitting coach bringing stuff into the clubhouse and changing, everyone embracing it, and then just a guy with no higher credentials, just adding that little bit of polish to it at the end.
Hard 90 podcast through Required Radio at Hofstra University. I'm Tim Crowley, joined by Will Thompson and Josh Lindenberg for our final episode of 2020 in our holiday celebration here on the Hard 90 podcast. So a very happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, to whatever you celebrate, to our entire Hard 90 community. We appreciate you tuning in for all of this crazy year that has been 2020, and we wish you a happy and safe holiday season.
You know, have an opportunity to speak. I talking to Pedro that out on the field on that when the ceremony was going on, he was just telling me that, you know, that guy right over there, David Ortiz, is one of the best guys that ever played this game and a great human being. I'm like, oh yeah, all right, Pedro, you know.
And to all that have listened throughout the first 49 episodes, but a big week next week, episode 50 coming at you on the Hard 90 podcast.
Hey guys, Hard 90 alum Jack Halstead here, and I just want to say a huge shout out to Tim, Will, Josh, and all the interviews and all the guests that have come on to make this podcast possible. It's a big deal for you guys to have made it to half of 100 episodes. I'm not going to be the first, and I certainly won't be the last person to say this, but I'm really proud of you guys for everything that you've done and how far you've come. It's a big deal that you turned a simple idea into such a big podcast for you guys. Congrats. Now let's throw it back inside of episode 50 with Tim and the gang.
And thank you to our guy, Jack Halstead, for bringing us back inside episode 50 of the Hard 90 podcast. Again, Tim Crowley with you, joined by Will Thompson and Josh Lindenberg. So before we continue on our celebration of episode 50, there's plenty of baseball news that we want to talk about this week. The first of which, it is a little bit of a somber note. We want to recognize the passing of Dodgers legendary manager and Hall of Famer Tommy Lasorda, who passed away this past week at the age of 93. Tommy won 2 World Series with the Dodgers in the 1980s and is forever one of the greatest personalities that we've ever seen in the baseball world, leaving his impacts both on and off the field throughout Dodger Stadium and all across the country. So we want to pay our respects to Tommy, and our thoughts and prayers go out to the entire Dodgers organization and to the Lasorda family.
Absolutely. Tommy Lasorda is one of the greatest managers to ever manage in this game. And not only was he an amazing manager, but you mentioned to Tim what a personality he was. I mean, he had no problem trash talking. He had no problem getting into it with umpires. He's almost kind of a brand of manager that you don't really see in the game today, because you don't see managers going out flipping bags, like screaming in the faces of umpires. You don't see managers like trash talking other teams in the media. You don't see managers going out to fight the Philly fanatic. Like you don't really. It's not something. Could you imagine like Aaron Boone doing something like that? Like Aaron Boone like barely talks to anyone and just like sits in the dugout and chews gum for the entire game. So it's a brand of manager. I mean, now you have guys who are run primarily on analytics. You have guys who are player managers, usually a combination of the two. You don't really have those disciplinarian personality type managers in the game anymore that were so prevalent back when Tommy Lasorda was the manager. Obviously, he was the manager forever. So I can't even point out a specific decade. He's a manager. And I mean, you guys like Earl Weaver as well. It's incredibly to see that Tommy Lasorda passed away. However, in 93 years, and no one will ever say that they went away too soon. But man, what a life he lived in his 93 years, and boy did he leave his mark on his 70 plus years in the Dodgers organization.
The baseball world definitely lost a great the other day, and he will be truly missed by everyone in the baseball world, and baseball won't be the same without him.
You know, when I think about Tommy Lasorda, there's always one story that comes to mind to me. And, you know, I read it years ago, early in his years. It actually might have even been before he got to the majors with the Dodgers. But, you know, he was managing a game, and, you know, a couple of days later, he was having a meeting with some of the Dodgers ownership. And it was right around the time that Vince Scully had, you know, really started to make his mark in the game. And, you know, he made a comment to ownership saying, hey, you know, that Scully kid you hired, man, he's awesome. Like, he's a great voice, and you guys made a great decision. This guy's going to be with this organization for a long time. And, you know, one of the members of ownership said, oh, well, thanks, Tommy. We really appreciate that. Wait, how do you know what Scully sounds like? Oh, I got thrown out in the second inning the other night, so I listened to his broadcast from the clubhouse. And if that is not the essential Tommy Lasorda, I don't know what is. You know, obviously, you know, everyone's seen the clip this week that's kind of resurfaced of him pulling Dave Roberts aside before his press conference after Game 6 of the 2017 World Series, saying, "Hey, you haven't won until you've won tomorrow," and you hear the entire media room erupt. And again, just that's the personality that Tommy Lasorda brought to this game, and certainly should not be overshadowed by his success as a manager. As we mentioned, you know, multiple World Series titles with the Dodgers. We all know the clip of him running out of the dugout after Kirk Gibson's home run in '88. You were talking about one of the greatest figures to ever come through this game. And again, at 93, a life fulfilled, a complete life lived on and off the field for Tommy Lasorda, and the baseball world will miss him deeply. Another shout out we do want to give on a little bit of a happier note in a transition is we want to shout out a guy, a Hard 90 alum, that actually just called it a career today behind the mic, that being Victor Rojas with the Los Angeles Angels, stepping away to grow his brand Big Fly Apparel that we talked about when he came on the show just a few months ago, and also with a grandchild on the way. Very excited for the entire Rojas family, but definitely wanted to pay gratitude for everything that Victor Rojas has done to the game, whether it be with the Angels, whether it be to Will's liking out back in Jersey with his start with the Newark Bears. Victor Rojas has turned in one heck of a career, and definitely wishing him the best in his next endeavors.
For sure. I mean, Victor Rojas really made his mark behind the mic with the Angels. I mean, just ask anyone who really watches his home run calls or kind of sees. I mean, everyone knows Big Fly Ohtani-san. I mean, everyone knows Victor Rojas by Big Fly. So he definitely made his mark on the game, and really excited for his next chapter, no doubt about it.
Big mazel tov to Rojas and his family. A great career, and I'm wishing him nothing but the best in his future endeavors.
So now we do have some baseball transactions to look at. One of them actually just breaking a few minutes before we started recording. One of those guys that we talked about back a few months ago when the non-tender deadline was coming up, a guy we didn't know where that was going to take him, and now has a home for 2021, that being Kyle Schwarber, heading from Chicago to our nation's capital. He signs a one-year deal worth $10 million to go to Washington. What are we thinking about this pickup? Obviously, we know when Schwarber's on, that's a dangerous guy with the bat in his hands and can instantly jumpstart an offense like few players in baseball.
Yeah, I think that you could really tell with the Nationals their goals were for this offseason. Because we know they have the starting pitching, right? I mean, their bullpen's always been a little bit shaky, but they're always you can always look to add cheap additions here and there for the bullpen. However, what was very apparent, especially early in the year when the Nationals were on national TV constantly, and whoever, because I mean, well, they started against the Yankees, but regardless, you could really tell that, man, because what if you remember Juan Soto, I believe it ended up being a false positive because he was back pretty soon after. But you could really tell, man, if you take Juan Soto out of this Nationals lineup, it is a dud. Like there is nobody there. I mean, you could see on opening day after Eaton's home run against Garrett Cole. I mean, there was just nothing in that lineup. And you could really tell what Mike Rizzo's goal was for this offseason, which was you got to get protection behind Juan Soto. And pretty much accomplished that. I mean, Josh Bell, when he made that acquisition, look, if you're getting 2019 Josh Bell or somewhere close to it, I think that could be a really nice pickup for them. I mean, obviously, if he's back to what he is this year, that's not going to be good, but it's 60 games. And the same can kind of be said for Kyle Schwarber. We know Kyle Schwarber has big power. He had a rough 2020. He ended up getting non-tendered by the Chicago Cubs. But this is a guy that hit 38 home runs in the 2019 season. So I think that it's really apparent what the Nationals are trying to do. They recognize their holes, especially in a division that's really, it's an excellent division because everybody's getting better. Well, maybe not the Phillies, but everybody's getting better. And the Nationals are really trying to fortify that lineup around Juan Soto. The one question I have about this is Juan Soto, his entire career, has played left field for the Nationals. Kyle Schwarber, his entire career, played left field for the Cubs. They're either one, banking on the DH because that would certainly be helpful for the Nationals as it would be for plenty of other teams, as definitely the Mets as well, as we'll talk about when we talk about Lindor stuff. But are you putting Kyle Schwarber in right field? Like, how is that going to work? So I think that's the one thing I'm really interested to see, specifically if there is no DH in the National League this year, that the Nationals are going to have to work around with two guys who are not very strong defensively and trying to who's going to play right field. I guess we'll have to find out. But in the lineup specifically, you have a lot more power, and Juan Soto has some protection now. And that it's going to be interesting to see. I don't know if they're on the level of the Mets and the Braves even with this signing, but I definitely think it's a good pickup, specifically on a one-year deal.
Well, Will made a great point by saying that if you really do, you take Soto out of this Washington Nationals lineup, who do you got left? I mean, you do have Josh Bell, but that's really it. You still have Scherzer as your star pitcher and everything, but offensive talent-wise, there's not a lot left. So overall, I think this is a good move by the Nationals to bring in some talent, and it's only a one-year contract. And although he didn't have the brightest 2020 season. He only had 11 home runs in 59 games. It's sort of in a way it's similar to the Cam Newton. It's a low risk, high reward type of deal for me. If he does really well, great. Then they can talk contract extensions after this season. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with Kyle.
It's going to be a big addition. We know that, if he gets on a roll, those right field bleachers could be you'd be running and trying to either find a home run ball or get out of the way of a laser coming out to those right field bleachers in DC. So we'll stay in the division now again, we talked about the baseball gods blessing us with some excellent content for episode 50, and Will just spoiled it a minute ago. We knew that when Steve Cohen came in here to buy the New York Mets, we knew they were going to be aggressive. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when they would make that first big move. Signed James McCann a couple weeks ago, and now comes the big one. Francisco Lindor is going to be a New York Met after he was acquired with Carlos Carrasco by the Mets, who sent back to Cleveland Andres Jimenez, Ahmed Rosario, along with two prospects in Josh Wolf and Isaiah Green. we knew this something was coming. You know, would Bauer be the first to go to New York? Would it be George Springer? Would they explore the trade market? And would it be Lindor? Now we have our answer. And you are getting, for your fans in Queens, your fans in Flushing, one of the most electrifying players in baseball, one of the best bats at the shortstop position over the last 5 years, and a whole lot of fun and a whole lot of smiling coming to Citi Field.
Yeah, on a 1 to 10 scale for how I would rate this deal for the Mets, I'd probably give it about a 15, to be quite honest with you. I mean, this is an absolute home run deal for the Mets. Again, you knew with Steve Cohen coming in, not only were they going to be aggressive, but they're not going to be afraid to take on salary. In this move with bringing in Carrasco and Lindor, they're bringing in around $45 million worth of contract next year, factoring in whatever they settle at for Francisco Lindor's last arbitration year. So I guess the number kind of depends there. But I mean, it is an awesome move for the Mets, no doubt about it. Lindor is one of the best shortstops in the game. I mean, he's an incredible defender. A little bit of a down year offensively last year, but I mean, how many times have we said down 2020 offensively for these guys? We certainly hit on later in one of our interviews. But it is an awesome signing. I mean, Lindor's electric with the glove. I mean, he is a guy that can single-handedly energize a fan base, and that is something that the New York Mets have been looking for a while now. I mean, Pete Alonso you could say he was kind of it, but I mean, adding in Francisco Lindor at shortstop, you'd have to think, even though he's a year away from free agency, I don't see why the Mets would make this deal if they weren't going to try really hard to extend him. He's young. You could extend him for 9 to 10 years. And then even though Carlos Carrasco is not definitely not on the caliber of Francisco Lindor, I'd argue it's almost as important of a pickup for them, because the Mets last year had, outside of Jacob deGrom, I mean, Noah Syndergaard got hurt. Marcus Stroman didn't even pitch. He ended up opting out. And you saw the issues with the Mets was the depth of their rotation. Rick Porcello was miserable in his 1 year in Queens. Michael Walker was miserable. And any guy that they tried to throw in between, I mean, Steven Matz, goodness. So you really, really needed a guy, because, I mean, Noah Syndergaard will probably be back in June or July. Putting in a guy in Carlos Carrasco, who's kind of been overshadowed in Cleveland with the other studs in his rotation. I don't think people really understand how good of a pitcher Carlos Carrasco is. I mean, he's borderline. You'd probably classify him as the number 2, but could certainly be an ace on a lot of teams. I think he's a perfect guy to slide into that number 2 spot behind Jacob deGrom until Syndergaard gets back, and having Carlos Carrasco going into the playoffs as your number 3 guy. I mean, that's going to be tough to beat. And I think going into next year, the Mets are they're right on caliber with the Atlanta Braves. I think it's going to be a really fun NL East race next year. And to be honest with you, they didn't even really give up that much. And that's due to a lot of reasons. I think the Cleveland Indians, I think they couldn't have been in a worse position, to be quite honest with you. You look at, because at the end of the day, everyone knew the Indians had to deal him. Like, they had no leverage. Everybody on the planet knew that Francisco Lindor had to be traded. So at the end of the day, Sandy Alderson and Jared Porter could say, what are you going to do? Not trade him? No, they have to trade him. They know their ownership's not going to pay him this year. So, and Carlos Carrasco is not a cheap contract either. So, I mean, and not to mention, not only that, but all these teams who are maybe, let's say the Indians are having a very high asking price for Lindor, they could say, all right, you know what? I'll just wait for next year when there's a huge influx of star shortstops coming onto the market. You're looking at Corey Seager. You're looking at Carlos Correa. Lindor certainly as well. I believe Trevor Story might be as well. But yeah, he is. So, I mean, there is no shortage of shortstops. The Indians had absolutely no leverage. Everyone knew they had to get rid of these guys. And so they didn't get a great return. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Andres Gimenez had a solid first year. I don't know if he's going to be that great with the bat, to be honest with you, looking at his minor league numbers. I mean, Ahmed Rosario, to be honest with you, I think he's a bust. I think he's terrible. He doesn't walk at all. Like, he's shown flashes here and there, but I mean, he's a brutal defender, doesn't really get on base at all. I don't think he's very good, but you might as well just take take a flyer on him. And then Josh Wolf I actually like, and Isaiah Green hasn't had a pro debut yet because he was just drafted. But not a great return for the Indians, but I don't know if there was a better return they could have gotten, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I gotta say, if you're a Mets fan right now, after years of suffering, you gotta be happy to get one of the best players in MLB right now. It's a really big move for the Mets, considering Steve Cohen really hasn't made a splash deal yet, and Mets fans were sort of waiting for that splash deal, and this is the splash deal to show that he's making big baller moves, I guess you could call it. And this brings the Mets into legit contention for the National League East division. But you also got, if you think about it, who's going to win the NL East, I think the Atlanta Braves still. Even with the addition of Lindor, I still think the Atlanta Braves will pull off the NL East in the end. They have, in my opinion, both in the bullpen and offensive power, the Atlanta Braves have more talent than the New York Mets.
It's obviously going to be a fun division to watch. And, Will, you mentioned, the down year for Lindor certainly was, only had about 258 to 750 OPS, but he did play in all 60 games. And, you're getting durability out of Lindor when you acquire a player of that caliber. And we obviously talked about, there are a lot of down years in 2020. How much are you really going to weigh that in to your evaluation of a guy going into 2021? Well, what you should think about is a guy that's, two-time Gold Glove winner, two-time Silver Slugger, had made 4 straight All-Star appearances prior to 2020 when we didn't have an All-Star game. He's a clutch player in the playoffs. He's obviously incredible with the glove. He can do just about everything in the field. And Josh talked about the energy that he brings. And, is there even a downside to this deal for the Mets? Oh, wait, no, it's for us coming in our pockets because we're not going to get $10 tickets to Mets games anymore, which is unfortunate. But I guess I can make that sacrifice for our Mets fans down at Hofstra to be happy and, maybe compete for a title now. And, it's all, maybe this is a shortened return to the World Series than we originally thought. Is this a team that's going to be able to get back to a World Series for the first time since 2015? And, how much different is that roster going to look? It certainly is. You obviously still have DeGrom there, you still have Syndergaard there, but this is a new look team with a lot of energy, a lot of talent. I would certainly think, you can make the argument right now that you're maybe looking at a better lineup than that 2015 team, top to bottom, especially with the addition of Lindor. This is going to be a very, very, very fun Mets team to watch. That's no question. Looking back at Cleveland, obviously we talked, this is a move that had to happen. They've never been big spenders in free agency. They don't really have the capability or the funds to hold on to superstars like this for a long period of time and sign extensions. So with that return you got back, obviously they do get 2 major league players that haven't been great for the Mets, have certainly not reached the potential that they maybe once had envisioned. Is this a place that maybe it's just a change of scenery can jumpstart them? We talked about the 2 prospects. Where does this move put Cleveland? We obviously know they still have plenty of starting pitching, and that's after dealing, pretty much everybody that we've talked about. Corey Kluber, gone. Trevor Bauer, gone. Mike Clevenger, gone. We still have the unanimous American League Cy Young Award winner in Shane Bieber and plenty of talent behind him. Where do you see Cleveland moving forward? And, provided that maybe this isn't a team now that in most cases would not make the playoffs. But then you got to remember, this is still the AL Central. Everybody can still have a chance year in and year out. We could even see Casey Mize go and make a run for the Tigers. That's how bad this division has been and unpredictable this division has been for a handful of years. What do you see out of Cleveland moving forward? Do you see this as a team that kind of falls off, or do you think there's still some formula that they could return to October?
I know their pitching is still good even when they deal Carlos Carrasco. I understand that. I just don't see how you can have their offense was among the worst in the MLB last year. And then they were still able to get to the postseason. It's just how many offensive pieces can you continue to take away from this Indians team and still expect them to be competent enough to score 3 to 4 runs a game? I just don't know that answer. Because even the guys that they got back in the Clevenger deal, I don't really love a lot of the position players they got. I mean, they certainly have a good farm system. So if certain guys pan out, sure. Maybe Ahmed Rosario gets away from the pressure of New York and starts to pan out, I personally, I can't really see that happening. So I'd like to say that their pitching is good enough to overcome it, but I think this offense is now getting to a point where it's so bad that I don't know if it's going to be enough to overcome. I don't think it'll be enough to overcome how great the starting pitching is, and maybe overcome's the wrong word, but I just don't see it. I think the Twins are significantly better. I'm not the biggest guy on the White Sox. I'm not a huge like White Sox believer. However, I think they're certainly better than Cleveland at this point. So I mean, you'd have to think Cleveland is right around that 80 to 83 win mark kind of team, because they'll pick up their wins against Detroit and Kansas City, and that's kind of what they'll be. So I think this is the year where you'll really start to see that you can't just keep peeling these guys who are amazing offensively. Just plug in guys who are and then just hope your pitching carries you to wins. I think this might be the breaking point for them.
Well, for me, really, the next step for the Cleveland Indians is to figure out who your next superstar is going to be offensively.
I think they have it in house. I really do. You got to think Jose Ramirez right now.
For sure.
I do. When I think of superstar, his name comes to mind, and I think that's really where Cleveland's got to put their brain to. You want to look at other teams that are trying to do this right now. Look at the Red Sox. They're trying to make a superstar out of Alex Verdugo. Lindor was a homegrown talent as well. So I really think Cleveland this season is figure out who's going to lead this team in the future. Like we said, Jose Ramirez is definitely an option for this team. Probably will be it, in my opinion. But figure out who that next superstar is going to be and lead that Cleveland team back to a playoff run.
And we should make it known that obviously Lindor's going to be the guy that headlines the steal. But do not forget about what Carlos Carrasco can bring to a rotation. Obviously, we think about recently the incredible comeback story to be back on the mound pitching at a high level after battling leukemia and defeating cancer. You're now thinking about a guy that came back in 2020 just a few months after having his bout with leukemia and put up a 2.91 ERA and was one of the most durable guys in the majors throughout his entire career. For a guy like Will who loves his FIP, Carlos Carrasco has been pretty durable in that department as well. Has had a pretty solid ERA right around 3 for most of his career. At 18 wins, was 4th in Cy Young voting that year that Corey Kluber won his 2nd in 2017. This is a guy that I feel gets overlooked a lot. And, when you're going to have a guy like Jacob deGrom in the rotation, that might still happen when you get to Queens. But we know that the Mets, one of their big issues the last few years is it's deGrom and who else? Who's going to fall up behind him? Now they have that durability that they didn't have for deGrom for years upon years after that World Series trip in 2015. That might be – I'm not going to say it's as equally big as Lindor. I'd be laughing myself out of the room to say that. But this Carlos Carrasco deal is going to be overlooked by a lot, and it can't be because his impact on this team in 2021 is going to be huge.
100%. I mean, you look at what the Mets – if you look at how the Mets did last year, their offense was one of the best in baseball. Now, if you look at average with runners in scoring position, they finished 29th. So maybe you could look at that. But I mean, if that's not the most Mets thing ever, you lead the league in every offensive category. You finish 29th with the average with runners in scoring position, and then you end up finishing 26th and 34. I mean, what else? But I mean, hopefully that starts to change. But I mean, you're right, Tim, because Carlos Carrasco has really kind of been overlooked and a little bit underappreciated in his time in Cleveland. Still might be with New York a little bit. I'd think maybe not just because of the stage he's on. But I mean, there's no doubt if you have Carlos Carrasco as a 2 or a 3 starter going into a playoff series, assuming a healthy Syndergaard, you're looking at a 3. I mean, even just look at this Mets rotation as a whole when Syndergaard gets back, when healthy. deGrom, Syndergaard, Carrasco, Marcus Stroman, David Peterson. That is a really good rotation. And to factor in a bullpen that I like a lot, as well as a lineup that's outstanding and just that was outstanding before and just added Lindor. I mean, I think them in Atlanta is a dead heat. I would give the slight edge to the Mets, although I do understand an argument can be made for the Braves. I totally get it. I mean, they're excellent as well. So I think the addition of Carlos Carrasco really helps fill that major need for the Mets, which is rotation depth. And I hate to put that label of rotation depth on Carrasco because he's much better than that, but it is a really good pickup for the Mets and probably a bigger need than shortstop was. And of course, Lindor is the better player, but Carrasco is a really important pickup for the Mets, no doubt about it.
And are the Mets done? I don't think so. You know there's still going to be moves up Uncle Steve's sleeve in the coming weeks. But again, as we knew, the second he put ink to paper signing that deal to become the owner of the New York Mets, we know there's still plenty to come over in Queens, just as there's plenty to come on this episode 50 of the Hard 90 podcast. Our first interview of the day coming up is going to be featured another amazing play-by-play voice that we've been so privileged, and it was such a pleasure to talk to him. Dave Sims with the Seattle Mariners, a legend in his own regards, joining us on the show for episode 50. Let's throw to that right now. And welcome back inside episode 50 of the Hard 90 podcast through Acquired Radio at Hofstra University. Tim Crowley, joined by Josh Lindenberg, and we're joined by our first guest today, the longtime voice of the Seattle Mariners, Dave Sims, joins us. Dave, thanks so much for coming on. It's an honor to have you.
Good to be with you, fellas. Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it. Hope you're doing well.
So let's dive right into it here. So take us through what your sports upbringing was like, and when did you know that you would be devoting your life to broadcasting?
I've been around sports since I was about yay big because my dad worked at the Philly Post, the main post office at Philly at 30th Street. If you've been on Amtrak, you know what it is, right across from 30th Street Station. And historically, and probably now, and it certainly was then, it was predominant. It was a heavy, middle class, working class black population in general, and specifically a lot of black guys who had been in World War II and Korea, had gone to HBCUs, very athletic. And so anyway, they had softball leagues, they had basketball leagues. My father played in the softball league. And every summer for 3 years when I was like 5, 6, 7, 8, he'd take me to the game with my brother. And we'd play in the dirt or whatever and be watching him playing. And I was around it. And then we also growing up in Philly, we lived 15-minute walk from Connie Mack Stadium. And I mean, I could go out my front porch and go like this and see if the Phillies were home and see if the lights were on. So I've been around it all my life. My father was a huge sports fan. So, I mean, I grew up going to Phillies games, Warriors games to see Wilt Chamberlain, Eagles games to see them. So I've been around it all my life and, played since I was, going back to that age. And it's probably in high school when I started doing a little bit of writing, and I was a pretty good baseball player, but they say, hey, you may not make it. And if you don't make it, you better have something to fall back on once you think about covering sports. I was like, light bulb, boom. And I went from there.
So we're obviously going to get into baseball in just a minute, but you've covered pretty much everything at this point. One of those big ones being college basketball. You've had a lot of time in this industry from your time at ESPN, broadcasting the Big East on FS1, which I believe is one of the most fun conferences in all of college hoops to watch. And then you're also hosting a radio show with Coach K. So you've done just about everything. What's it been like to maintain this career in the baseball offseason? Do you have some favorite memories from your time in college hoops?
Oh, a whole bunch of them. If we could be here for hours. I mean, the primo one is the George Mason win over Connecticut in 2006 in the Eastern Regional Final. I don't know what the number was, but Mason was a big underdog. Connecticut was just rolling. They had a great club. They probably are 8, 9, 10 point favorites, and they wound up losing in the thriller of thrillers. It was in DC, and George Mason's right across the river in Fairfax. And so you could feel everybody in the building's breath go in, out, in, out. And I was working with the now late, great Dave Gavitt. I even said that. I said, Coach, you feel that building? You feel that roof? It's like a souffle, man. It's like coming down. And that was back and forth game, and Mason wound up winning it. And if I remember, I think I even called. I said, Coach, I've done enough Connecticut games. I know what Calhoun's going to call. And he called for, and that was the end of regulation. That's what he called for, a guy to run the baseline, come opposite, catch and try to hit a 3, and he missed it. and then Mason goes on to win in overtime. So that was the primo in basketball. Called a couple of let's say I did color the year Nova won the Big East title. I think after blowing it one year, and they came back to win it the next year. I was working with Tom Dorr, who is the TV voice of the Bulls. Got to work that, and then I did so many because we're located here in Manhattan. A lot of St. John's, Seton Hall, Villanova, Providence games, and back when they were still in the Big East, Boston College. I mean, I've seen a lot of great players, man, and dating back to when I started doing hoop games in '91, February '91. So it's been a tremendous run, and I enjoy a lot of the guys. Big East is home. I'm an East Coast and I-95 guy like you guys are. And, I got to know, excuse me, a lot of the coaches and administrators over the years. And I was out of it for a couple of years. And then I got a call, Tim Brando, was a good friend and, terrific broadcaster. He told the Fox people, said, if you're going to do Big East, you got to get Dave Sims. The next thing I get a call, hey, you like to do Big East basketball again after missing a couple of years? I said, heck yeah. So that's where I am right now doing that. And, a little downtime. Baseball, and with the pandemic, not doing as many games. I mean, years ago, I used to do 50 games a year, but that's not the case anymore.
So you also had some time calling football and time on the radio for Westwood One. What do you enjoy about the opportunity of a national broadcast on the radio?
Oh, it's national. That's why. I mean, I was doing national. I started, my first game was at San Diego, at Kansas City, right around, I think it was Thanksgiving Sunday, 1994. I got to work with Hall of Famer Jack Ham. And that was my first game with them. I think I did one or two others. Then I was full-time starting in 98 through 16. And I've worked with Jack Ham, Doc Walker, the late, great Denny Green, John Riggins, Dave Jennings, Dan Reeves. I mean, John Kajemi, a whole bunch of guys, Jeff Bostic. And NFL speaks for itself, man. It's tremendous. Did some AFC and NFC championship games. Did about 7 or 8 Pro Bowls, a lot of playoff games. So, being national, if you're going to be in this business, I mean, being a broadcasting, ego comes into it, and you like to be heard nationally. And I certainly, having done that, helped me a lot in getting the job in Seattle because a lot, the games are carried out there, and a lot of people are familiar with my work. So that didn't hurt in the interview process.
So we definitely, you've done basketball, you've done football, thinking about Seattle now, we're joined by the host of our hockey podcast here at Hofstra. And I know it's got to be an exciting time in Seattle right now, as I know Josh has been very excited about Seattle coming back to hockey, or hockey coming back to Seattle.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun, man.
Are you excited that Seattle's finally going to have a hockey team again? And just sort of describe what's been the atmosphere right now in the city of Seattle surrounding the Kraken?
Well, the pandemic is the focal point of just about everything. But when you do break it down and then go into a subheading of sports, I'd say people are pretty excited. I mean, they're desperate. Right now, it's all about the Seahawks. I mean, the Seahawks are going to be probably no worse than a 3 seed. And so that's exciting, and they've been a couple Super Bowls and they've been a primo. They've been an elite team the last few years, and people are hacked off at the Mariners for not being able to make the playoffs since 01. And then I would say looking for basketball, want the Sonics back badly, but there's a curiosity and there's an excitement. The Kraken sold out whatever allotment of tickets they have for season tickets. I think they pretty much sold them out within an hour. And they're going to fire up a year from now. So that would be September, if everything's going back to normal. They'll be doing their preseason workouts in September, and that's going to be exciting. And they're redoing Key Arena. What is it called? It's got some funky
Climate
Pledge Arena. So they're bringing it up to 21 standards, and it should be fun. I think it'll be well received. And Everett Fitzhugh ready to do hockey on the radio. I got to meet him, good guy, and in a unique situation. He's a young black guy, about 31, 32, from Detroit. Grew up on hockey. Spent the last few years doing minor league hockey in Cincinnati, and he's going to be terrific. He's going to be a star in Seattle for sure.
It's gonna be awesome.
So let's stay in Seattle and let's talk a little bit about what you've been able to experience in your time with the Mariners, dating back to getting that job in the 2007 season. Take me through how the opportunity really came about and what it's been like to be the voice of a team for over a decade now.
The late great Ron Fairley was retired after the 06 season. And the one thing you're going to find out in all kinds of American business life, and especially, and I can speak specifically to broadcasting, it's not always what you know, but who you know. And turned out that our director of marketing was a guy that had gone to Syracuse with my brother-in-law. And I get a call from my brother-in-law and said, "Hey, Kevin said that, you're interested in a broadcast job in Seattle." I said, "Yeah, what is it?" "Well, Ron Fairley retired." I said, "He does color. I do play-by-play." He said, "Whatever." So I just let it go. I said, that's going to be a waste of time. And then I get a call from the aforementioned Kevin Martinez, and he says, "Hey, got your name and my name on the line. What's up? You want this job or what?" So I applied, and there was like 100 other guys that applied, and I had a great interview, and they vetted me, and I got the job. And here we are, going into my 15th year in 21. It's a very good baseball town, and the weather there. We start out, it's a lot chilly in April and May, and then June it warms up, and then July, August, and about midway into September, the weather's spectacular. And the days at the peak of summer, it doesn't get dark till like 10 to 10. And it was always a dream to have my own baseball team, and now I got it. It's not like the days when I was doing ESPN, you'd helicopter in, do a game, and then leave and go somewhere else the next week. I mean, I'm with this team every day, and with the exception of pandemic, you get to really get to know guys because I'm in the clubhouse every day. I'm in the other clubhouse talking to coaches, managers, and everything before the games, and sometimes after the games. It's a thrill, man, and it's to be identified like that, and you have your heart and soul into it, and I'm totally invested in it. And it's exciting as heck, man, and the other thing that's really cool about having a job in Seattle, we're it in terms of baseball in that part of the country, and our fan base extends into British Columbia, probably Manitoba to a slight extent. The Blue Jays dominate Canada, but we have British Columbia, Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Northern Oregon, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. So we've got geographically a huge chunk of the nation. Maybe not numbers wise in terms of population, but it's a big piece of the country. It's a lot of fun, man, and it's it's a dream come true. I work my tail off to be in position to get something like this, and I thoroughly enjoy it.
So looking back on 2020, the Mariners finished in third place in the AL West and 5 games behind Toronto for the final playoff spot. Despite the 60-game schedule, how much do you weigh this season in the improvement of this franchise?
Well, you get to see a lot of improvement. I mean, Kyle Lewis wins Rookie of the Year. J.P. Crawford, Evan White win Gold Gloves. Dylan Moore might be, he might become a national name this year. He picks up where he left off. I mean, he led the club. He was among the leaders in many stats whatever stats that Kyle Lewis didn't lead in, he led in. Pitching, Justice Sheffield, he took a step up. Justin Dunn, a Long Island kid, he really got his feet wet this year, and I think that he learned a lot about himself and about how to pitch in the American League. Marco Gonzalez is our ace. He's not a hard thrower, but he can pitch and he can hit his spots, and he was our ace. And heck, we were in playoff contention going into that last 10, 12 days, which I think we were surprised. I mean, even the manager said that in one of our Zoom calls. And it was great that, and Jerry Dipoto, when he put this thing together, basically broke down a team that won 89 games. I think it was in the 18 season. And he started all over. And we got a whole bunch of kids. The farm system was rated quite low, and it's now probably a top 5, top 10 right now. So, the prospects look good. it's been the first time we've had a full rebuild probably in a long time in Seattle. So yeah, just right now, the big thing is, we got to beat this pandemic. Hopefully we'll get a decent start to baseball. I'm anticipating that it'll get moved back about a month and probably open late May. And if we get 140 games in, that'd be great. And maybe the second half of the season, or maybe midway through the season, we'll be able to get fans in the ballpark.
So I would definitely want to go in depth on one of the guys that you just talked about, and Kyle Lewis. I have to bring him up, or else I think my boss is that the summer collegiate team that he played for down in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, the Katuah Cavaliers. As an alumni there, it's great to see him burst onto the scene, a unanimous Rookie of the Year this year.
Yeah.
From what you were able to see, what makes him such a quality player, and how bright is his future in Seattle?
Well, he's a great kid, terrific parents, great home, raised right, works hard, doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. Puts in the work, it comes early, stays late. I mean, everything, all the checklists that you would have for somebody to succeed and to be great, he hits every box. And he's got, and he's blessed with tremendous talent as well to go along with the work ethic. So he covered center field a lot better than I thought he was going to. I thought he was I kept hearing from scouts that he was going to be a really good corner outfielder. Well, heck, as far as I'm concerned, he can be our center fielder the next 10, 15 years. I mean, he's that good. And he's got power pole to pole. I'd like to see him maybe try to steal some more bases. I think that was a pretty big part of our game, and hopefully it will continue on that road. He's a great kid. He's a great kid. So, and easy to root for. So, he's got a long way to go before he's on the same level with Griffey. But I mean, as an icon in Seattle. But I tell you what, he's off to a hell of a start.
So going behind the plate now, how do you see this club filling the hole of Austin Nola after his trade to San Diego?
He was great. Another terrific guy, good clubhouse guy. The Luis Torrens kid can swing it, and I've been impressed with a little bit I've seen of him. Good, and a good catcher too. Cal Raleigh is a kid they drafted. I want to say Florida State, switch hitting catcher, got some pop. He might be ready this year. We don't, I don't know. We're going to find out. So I think, Nola, now let's not confuse Nola for Johnny Bench now. I mean, he was really good, but yeah, I was surprised they traded him. They really like Ty France. They think that, he can play second, third, DH. So they really like him, and they always talk about how to bat. I mean, the ball comes off his bat. So curious to see how he does full, being with us from minute one this season. So, but I think the catching situation is going to be okay. And then they got Tom Murphy. Tom Murphy coming off his 19th season was his first full time. The first time he was the number one catcher. He put in a lot of hard work. He's a tough guy. He what did he hit? 18 homers off the top of my head. I don't know, 60 ribbies, splitting time with Omar Narvaez, and he did a very good job. Had a foot and ankle problem, knocked him out of this past season. So, there's no rush for Raleigh. I mean, if they got Murph will be number one. Torrens will be 1A. So be in good shape in that department.
Let's talk about the other end of the battery now, and a guy that you mentioned a few moments ago, Marco Gonzalez, who the more time he spends in Seattle, the better he seems to get, coming off of a really strong 2020 season. How important has he been to this rotation to provide some stability moving forward?
Well, with a lot of guys that he tagged around, and some of the veteran guys we've had his first 3 years, he's now that veteran guy, and he's done a really good job leading the young staff. And when Taijuan Walker was here, and hopefully we get him back. We're all hoping he re-signs with us. Those two provided tremendous leadership in the pitching department. Smart guy, relatively local in that he played in Gonzaga across the state over in Spokane. And he just gets it. Another one. Community, he and his wife, Monica, do a great job in the community. In terms of pitching, he knows how to. It's almost going way back. If you know your baseball history, Eddie Lopat was a great junk baller with the Yankees in the late 40s, early 50s. That year when they won that 5 straight championships, Jamie Moyer. I mean, guys that don't throw particularly hard, but they know it, as they say, the crafty left-hander. I mean, cut it, sink it, change up. Change up got hit a little bit more this past year, but he knows how to pitch, and he's tough, man. He actually threw something that we don't see. He threw, at least off the top of my head, I know he had one, maybe two complete games, which is an oddity in baseball the way they run it these days. But yeah, he's a good guy to have in a ball club. He's, when you look at his stuff, you'd say, on the way they like power pitching, and well, most teams like to have as many power pitchers as possible. He'd probably be a 3 or 4, but he's a 1 in our ball club. But his leadership is probably as big as anything as his presence on the mound.
So looking at the future, the AL West still has plenty of talent in Oakland and Houston. What moves do you believe need to come to allow Seattle to crack the top of the division?
Well, I don't anticipate. I shouldn't say that. We haven't made any big splash moves, free agent wise, to this point, and we still got time. I think the hope from top to bottom is that all the guys that have been acquired, Jerry continues. He's trying to rebuild the bullpen. The bullpen was terrible last year, so he's got to rebuild that for this year. Hopefully, the next couple of years, and then you're hoping to continued development of Evan White, J.P. Crawford, Shed Long, Cal Raleigh eventually be up. At some point, hopefully this year, Jarrett Kelnick will be up. Julio Rodriguez, those two guys are the studdest of the stud outfield prospects in baseball. What's my man's name? Trammell, who they got from the San Diego deal. He's going to be good. So it's just a matter of these guys. They're all not going to make it, obviously. When you got 15 young kids, they're all not going to make it. But if you can get 3 or 4, then you start maybe dealing like AJ Preller did in San Diego. You start dealing some prospects, go after a couple of veteran guys. That's going to be a big factor. So we'll see. I think this team's got a chance to be competitive. Houston's going to come back a notch, I think. Oakland, they're going to lose Hendricks. That's huge. He was maybe the best closer last year. The Angels pitching still not very good. Texas isn't very good, and we're sort of right in the middle with the chance to make a move up. So. I like our chances to compete this year, maybe even make it the wild card.
So we talked about the present team. We talked about the future. I do want to look back at some of the fun times that you've been able to call. We're lucky enough to have the broadcaster on who's called the most recent perfect game in baseball dating back to August of 2012 with King Felix shutting down the Rays. Take me through what calling that game was like, what the atmosphere of the park was, and, what that was like to watch one of the greatest players to ever run through Seattle in the last handful of years make his mark that day.
Yeah, it was certainly the crowning achievement for Felix because he was at the peak of his powers during that time. And tell you what, I can't remember seeing such a great pitcher get robbed of so many opportunities, getting 7-8 innings deep and losing 2-1, 3-2, 5-4. But it was great. It was a Wednesday getaway day game with Tampa Bay, about 20,000 people. Glorious day in Seattle. I was working with Dan Wilson. He's in the Mariners Hall of Fame, the Hall of Fame catcher. And hey Dan, we got a game, blah blah blah. And it was just another Wednesday. We're going to do it. And I was going to jump on a plane and go wherever the next road trip was. I don't remember that. And I had already called a perfect game against the Mariners. It was Philip Umber on the 21st of April, same year. And that was on a Fox BNet game where we were seen only in Chicago and Seattle until the last inning. So that was extraordinarily exciting. And then to have our guy on a beautiful day at home flirting with a perfecto was just off the chart exciting. And it was almost, it's hyperventilating time. It was, I was all in terms of passion for Felix, for the Mariners. I mean, he barely won the game. It was 1-0. Eric Thames made an unbelievable catch in the first inning, cut off a gapper in right center that probably would have scored at least one run. And after that, he would have scored. It would have been probably a triple. Yeah, it was a perfect game. It was super exciting, and you could feel the tension. I mean, it's like you shake up a bottle of soda, and all of a sudden everything starts shooting through the top, and it was like a slow motion, one of those kind of deals. It you don't get a chance to call no-nos or perfectos. And I had 2 that year. And actually, I had those 2 perfectos, and we had a 6-pitcher no-no against the Dodgers in that first Friday night in June, which was a lot of fun as well. But the Felix thing was easily no question, my baseball highlight of my career. I mean, perfect games. I mean, they're legendary, and people in Seattle who saw it, and I still hear from the people that say, "Oh, I was on YouTube and I was watching that game, and reliving it or seeing it for the first time," and it's really cool and pretty gratifying.
So in your early years in the job as the Mariners play-by-play, you got to watch Ichiro Suzuki up close. How special was that to watch this elite player? And do you have a favorite memory with Ichiro?
Probably favorite memory. He beat Mariano Rivera on what was the count, like a 2-1 pitch, and he got a cutter. He's obviously sitting on the cutter, and he got one he can handle, and he pulled it about 15 rows up in the lower stands in right field to walk off the game, and that was exciting. Somebody sent me a clip of that the other day. I'd almost forgotten about it. That was pretty exciting. But his artistry was tremendous. I mean, he wielded a bat like a daggone baton. What do you want? You want it down the left field line? Boom. You want me to yank one upper deck? Boom. And he could have even hit more home runs. I mean, when Griffey was there in 09, I mean, it was always fun to watch that. They were in the last group of BP. That last round would be home run derby, and he could match Junior. And they had a great relationship, great friendship. And then of course, what was it, 19, he retired over in Japan. And to be able to watch a whole country just freak out at the mere sight of the guy was amazing. I'm familiar obviously with the Beatles and Elvis and all that kind of stuff, but to see that type of adoration in front of you and be in a crowd like that, and you can feel the crowd just praying just for a glimpse of him, let alone touching him. It was great. He's Hall of Fame, obviously first ballot Hall of Fame. You don't have to think about that one. Great player. And when he was still in his prime, he could run with anybody, and his arm, forget about it. I mean, you run at your own risk when he was in right field. Just go back to that play in Oakland. He threw out Terrence Long his first or second year in the league. But still want to. I mean, that throw, the Dave Parker throw in the All-Star game to throw out Browning and Downing at home plate at the Kingdom, and Clementi's throw. He threw out Richie Hebner in the 71 World Series, of 3 of the greatest throws that come to mind that I've seen from right field.
So it's been a pleasure to have you on again. We're with Dave Sims, the play-by-play voice of the Seattle Mariners. But for my final question, I do want to step away from baseball for just a minute and think back on what we went through in 2020. And following the murder of George Floyd just a few months ago, you wrote a piece for the Seattle Times. And one of the featured lines in that piece was, "They are me and I am them." Take me through, what the opportunity was like, negotiating with Seattle Times to get that piece in, and what was going through your mind while you were writing it, and what do you believe still needs to come in the future to truly defeat systemic racism?
Well, the Seattle Times piece came. It was a Thursday night. My wife and I were sitting here watching Jeopardy. I get a phone call, and it was a 206 number, and I didn't recognize it. And I wasn't going to answer. And I said, what the heck, maybe it's important. It turned out it was a sports editor of the Seattle Times. And they said, "Hey, how are you, blah, blah, blah." I said, "Listen, we cut right to it. I'd like you to write a guest editorial about what's going on right now. And can you have it for a Sunday paper?" And I said, "Well, I'm an old newspaper guy for the Daily News here in New York. I know what deadlines are like." And so I said, "Yeah, let's do it." And, obviously at that point, this was early June, a week, 10 days after Floyd was murdered. And certainly there was a lot of thoughts in my mind, and I wrote them down. My wife and I, we were kicking around and wrote a draft. She worked on it, gave it back. I did it again, gave it back, and then we finalized it. And that could have been me at any time. I mean, so many things we've seen since then. People, unarmed black people, unarmed black men getting shot. black men being accused of stealing stuff. I mean, a 14-year-old kid down at a hotel, he's the son of a jazz musician. A woman freaks out, thinks that he stole her phone. I said, what are you talking about, ladies? There's a gajillion iPhones. I didn't steal it. Turned out it was left. We're always accused of stuff. When in doubt, blame the black guys. And I'm very sensitive to that, particularly at this stage of more so at this stage of my life. And need more dialogue for sure, and more of understanding of what black folks go through and have gone through. And I've been very lucky in my life. I've not had those kinds of situations, but I know people who have, and certainly I've read about all of them. And one of the lines I use, I didn't use it in the piece, but I've done a whole bunch of panel Zoom discussions. I said, if you don't have a black friend, you may want to go out and get one and talk to him or her. And that's where, if everybody would do that type of thing and be willing to have hard conversations, I think that would put us on the right track. I mean, it may never get solved, but it certainly damn sure needs to be improved. And and continuing education both sides. I mean, we could sit here all day and talk about this, but those are just some of the highlights that need to be. I mean, it's the other thing I always talk about. No matter where I am, I try to keep myself on my head on a 360 swivel, because you just never know. I mean, it's like going down a cover kick. You got to make sure that guy doesn't loop over and get you. I'm always aware of my surroundings and I never walk around with headphones and walk in the street, no matter what city I'm in. And so, enjoy life and everything, but you got to be. My awareness is even more heightened than it's ever been. So, that's where I am on that.
I appreciate your answer for that. And it's been a pleasure to have you on. It's an honor to have you on for this very special episode for us. Again, Dave Sims, play-by-play voice of the Seattle Mariners. Dave, thank you so much for your time. Really looking forward for season 15 for you when baseball does return in 2021. I'm hoping they start on time, but I think your answer of around May, I'd still be totally okay with that.
Absolutely. Tim, Josh, thanks a lot for the opportunity. That's a nice benchmark for you. Number 50. Good for you. Congratulations.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. All right,
Happy New Year. You guys be well. Stay safe.
Hey everyone, Hard 90 alum Max Milstein here. I just wanted to send a big congratulations to Tim, Will, and Josh, the real history buffs of the baseball world, on getting to episode 50 of the Hard 90 podcast. Boys, I am so proud of how far you guys and the show has come in the year and a half since we all arrived at Hofstra, and I cannot wait to see where you guys and the show goes in the next year and a half. Congratulations. Now let's throw it back inside episode 50 of the Hard 90 podcast.
And thanks to our guy, Max Milstein, for throwing it back inside episode 50 of the Hard 90 podcast. And a huge thanks to Dave Sims for joining us. What an awesome interview that was. So, Josh, start with you. What was your big takeaway from our talk with Dave?
Well, I think the big takeaway for me was about his article in the Seattle Times. I believe that's the name of the media organization out there, about the whole Black Lives Matter movement and the whole racial injustice movement that's going on right now in our nation. 2020 was a really bumpy year for a lot of people, and I had the chance to read Dave's article, and there were some points in there that just really hit home. And it's been time. I've been saying this for a while now, but it's been time for change for a long time, really, in this nation in regards to racial equality, and especially with the recent events of 2021 that just happened the other day. We really got to see some change in our nation and in our leaders and the way they handle themselves, and also the way citizens in the community handle themselves and their moral values, really. People need to be more respectful of all human beings, no matter the race, gender, sexuality, everything. So that was the big takeaway for me overall from the interview with Dave Simmons. But from a baseball aspect, it was just really cool to hear about all of his stories with Ichiro. That's a guy that me and you both grew up watching. So to hear him talk about, going to Japan and seeing how respected that guy is there, and to witness his final game as a Mariner, I think that's a priceless moment as a broadcaster. So that was really cool to hear him talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you mentioned that, going back to Japan and watching Ichiro retire, in his homeland, and he mentioned it. Obviously Ichiro is by far the top of this, but even the guy right behind you, Josh and Daisuke, when these were players that have made their mark in the majors, return back to Japan. You think of the late times of the the middle of the 20th century, and what some of the bands in America faced with that. Guys like Elvis Presley, when the Jacksons, the Beatles were making their run. The mobs, and obviously in a happy sense, these incredible crowds that followed them everywhere they went. It's the same thing with Ichiro back in Japan, and I know for Dave to be able to experience that firsthand was something really cool. Obviously from the baseball perspective, a guy that's watched so much history with the Seattle team, obviously is the broadcaster that called the last perfect game in all of baseball back with Felix Hernandez in 2012. That was really cool to hear about. Obviously you talked about the article, and we have talked about this on the show before, especially back in June when everything had hit its peak in terms of the protests, in terms of the nation finally taking a minute to acknowledge that there is problems with this country that need to be solved. And it's kind of disgusting that we still have to talk about it in 2020 and now even in 2021. But what I thought was just so important is, we can sit here and talk about it all we want. All the three of us can sit here and talk everything, but it doesn't matter because unfortunately we're not affected. This is the reality. It doesn't have anything to, we don't experience this. We just don't. No. It doesn't happen. And for Dave to bring that perspective on the show and take us through what he has to go through every day, and he poured his emotions into the article as well. To have that perspective gave a lot of depth to the show that we'd never had before. And I really appreciate Dave being able to provide that for us. And obviously from a baseball perspective, one of the best to do it behind the mic, and a guy that's seen so much history in Seattle and continues to do a great job behind the mic today. So again, a huge thanks to Dave Sims. And while we're on the talk of the Mariners, this is a team that's still in a pretty competitive AL West. We know the A's are still going to be up top no matter what they decide to do this offseason. We know the Astros aren't going away because, look, if a sign-stealing scandal that gets them shamed by the entire country can still lead them to within one game of the World Series and almost overcoming a 3-0 deficit in the American League Championship Series for what would have been only the second time in the history of baseball, they're going to be sticking around too. Where do you see the Mariners chalking up in this division in 2021?
Well, really, go ahead, Will.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just as far as the Mariners, I think they're still obviously in a rebuilding phase. So they're still going to be near the bottom with Texas. I think specifically Texas is definitely embarking on a much needed rebuild for them. So I think that, however, there's a lot of young talent. I mean, Kyle Lewis had an awesome rookie year. You have guys on the way. You have Jared Kelenic, who's good. He's really gonna be a future star. Like he is awesome, and he's not too far away. I mean, there's also guys like Taylor Trammell. I think their future outfield is gonna be really, really good. I even think their offense, for the most part, is pretty exciting. However, I think the pitching side is kind of where you have your problems, although there is some help on the way there as well. The Mariners farm system is pretty good. I mean, Marco Gonzalez is pretty solid at the top of the rotation. Justice Sheffield, he is a top prospect. He got traded from the Yankees in the James Paxton deal. He's kind of up and down, but last year really kind of broke out and had a really, really nice abbreviated 2020 season. And after that, I mean, you're really looking for guys to fill in behind him. They really need Yusei Kikuchi to actually like pitch how he was signed to do. So I think that until the Mariners get some pitching, we can't really look forward to them that much competing. However, I really do think that there's a bright future ahead for the Mariners for sure.
I would certainly agree.
Yeah.
And obviously, you got to tip your hat to Katuitalom Kyle Lewis that you just mentioned too, rookie of the year.
I should have mentioned that.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Mariners are definitely going to be towards the lower part of their standings. Obviously, their recent prime was with when Nelson Cruz was at his prime, and also Felix Hernandez, who I had the chance to witness in person at the time, a long time ago. It was called Safeco Field. So it's a beautiful ballpark. Definitely get the chance to go visit if you can. I got to see the Mariners face the Athletics, I believe it was. Yeah, the Oakland Athletics. It was a great game. Anyway, their prime was with Hernandez and Cruz, and that unfortunately, Hernandez isn't as good as he used to be, and obviously we know Cruz has departed from the Mariners. So yeah, they're somewhat in a rebuild, but I do expect in the upcoming years they'll be back in the playoffs. No
That's
doubt.
the team looking to get back to the playoffs for the first time since 2001. We got another interview on the way soon, but let's kind of dive in a little bit to the festivities that we do have planned for episode 50. And the first of that, played Red Sox trivia a long time ago, but I think it's time to challenge my co-host to this new episode of Hard 90 Trivia to see where we're at through the first few episodes. I guess you could say 50 is a few, right? We'll call this Hard 90 Trivia. We're going to have 5 categories. Let's see who wins. Will they win my affection? I don't know. We can find you something. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. Whoever wins trivia today is going to take home a Red Sox 2018 World Series Champions puzzle.
A puzzle. Okay.
I don't know. It was the first thing this week. I don't know. All right. So first category is going to be called roll call. So we're going to start first. How many episodes has Will Thompson been present for?
All but one.
Can I answer this?
Yeah. Either one of you can answer it.
49.
All right, so I need a number. So this is through
49.
49. This is entering 50. So this is gonna be 49 episodes. So we're
49.
talking about the first 49, not counting today.
Okay, so 47.
That would be correct. Can you name the 2 you missed?
The numbers? No.
I don't know if I know if I can tell you the numbers. I can tell you. So the one that I know, I'll give you a hint because Josh is gonna be next. There was the one episode I hosted by myself in a separate interview, and then Will was on, I believe, vacation in New York at one point.
Well, yeah, that was in August.
August. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So 47 to 49, not too bad. To finish out roll call, how many episodes has Josh been present for?
Oh gosh, I've been really busy lately.
I'm gonna say
I'm
32.
I'm gonna go 30. 33.
Wow.
And Josh evens the score. My goodness.
Yo, come on.
And that was first guess too.
Wow.
That's pretty good. All right. So that'll round out roll call. We get an even score through 2 questions. Let's move to guests. This should be a quick one. Let's see who can go the quickest. Who was the first guest on Hard 90?
Kevin Burkhardt.
That'll be a 2-1 for Josh. Who was the last guest? This is going to be one that you're going to have to think about because it's been a while. Who was the last guest on Hard 90 to be interviewed by all 3 hosts?
Oh.
Victor Rojas?
No. Oh goodness.
Same time frame actually. It was right around the
Dan Schulman.
And Josh taking a 3-1 lead. I don't know if he wants to take that.
That's the last one.
Do you want to get rid of that 3-1 lead, Josh? Do you want to give him the point so you don't choke that away? We know it comes with a 3-1 lead. But yeah, Dan Schulman, voice of the Toronto Blue Jays, was the last guest on Hard 93.
Wow.
All 3.
Yikes.
Goodness, it's been a while.
This is another one. Let's see who can go quick. Name 3 major league teams that have been represented by someone in an interview. It could be a broadcaster, former player, beat writer.
Ding, ding, ding. Ding, ding, ding. I'm Angels, Brewers, and Mariners.
Using 2 from episode 50, maybe giving a spoiler to what we're having coming up. Josh takes a 4-1 lead. Well, you got some more.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would have known that answer. Josh kind of just started saying "ding, ding, ding" over and over again.
I mean, I didn't say you had to buzz. I never said you had to buzz in. You could have given me 3 and taken the point.
I mean, I could have easily answered that question.
And that's all the excuses I'm hearing. Blah blah blah. Okay. Next category: location. 1 question in this category. How many episodes of Hard 90 have actually been recorded in the place that we thought we were going to be doing most of these, in room 141A of the Lawrence Herbert School of Communication?
I'm going to go 11.
I'm going to go with 9.
8.
All right. Well, you're calling back. What does that make it? 4-2?
4-2.
4-2 through 6? All right. Let's move on to dates. What date was the first episode of Hard 90 released?
Yeah, I have no idea.
November
something.
November 19th, 2019.
November.
You can keep going until I hear a correct
November
answer. I'll tell you.
18th. November
Josh takes a
17th.
5-2 lead.
Okay.
All right.
I
So then after that, we thought a lot of these episodes were going to be recorded in the comp school. Then COVID happened. Took a little while for us to get the show back up and running and find out where we're going to do this. So shout out to Zoom for allowing us to do this since then. On what day did Hard 90 return after quarantine started?
April
6th. April 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd,
April
1st.
Okay.
9th.
You just
So I still have not heard it. Somebody better call it out.
March 29th.
April 13th.
April 14th. April 16th, 17th, 18th.
You might as well tell us at this point, Tim.
28th, 21, 22.
All right, I'm still on the point then. March 30th.
I was one day off.
9.
Oh,
I gave everyone a chance to yell it out.
Poop.
All right. Final category. I'm pretty sure Josh is already clinched at this point. Let's see if Will can actually just throw up a couple of mercy points here. And which episode did the Mookie Betts trade bring during the show?
Episode 3. 2.
So
5.
Oh no! All right, no more of this. You have to alternate. I can't let people do like 6 answers in a row.
Thank you. I'm gonna go episode.
This trivia show is clearly corrupt.
I'm gonna say 3. No, wait, we already said 3. How about episode 4?
No.
Episode 5.
No.
Episode 6?
That would be correct.
Wow.
Final question again. Please make it
3.
close.
I can tie it. I can tie the game.
I'll think of one on the spot, and we can go, Final Jeopardy or something in honor of Alex Trebek as well. Final question for moments. In which episode did Hard 90 recap actual games in Major League Baseball for the first time?
32.
No.
What episode? 24.
No.
27.
No.
29.
Hey, it's my turn. It's my turn.
He was wrong anyway, so it doesn't matter.
27.
You just guessed that.
Yeah, I already guessed 27.
Oh, wait. Okay, then.
No, you forfeit your pick. Now, well, let's go.
34.
Now.
I'm not going to get this.
31.
No.
Tim, I don't think I'm going to get this.
You guys suck. It's 28. It's 28.
God, we keep dancing around it.
See, I'm not even going to make up a question right now because then we'll be here for another 4 hours. Josh wins trivia. Congrats, you're getting a Red Sox puzzle. On that note, let's head over to our second interview of the day. Another fantastic play-by-play boys joining us, going from the AL West in the Emerald City, heading out to the NL Central to Milwaukee. We're joined by Jeff Levering with the Milwaukee Brewers, another fantastic voice joining us here on episode 50 of the Hard 90 podcast. Let's throw to that now. And welcome back to episode 50 of the Hard 90 podcast through Acquired Radio at Hofstra University. Tim Crowley, joined by Will Thompson. We are back with another guest today. The play-by-play voice of the Milwaukee Brewers, Jeff Levering, joins us. Jeff, thanks so much for coming on.
You got it. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
So let's start back to the beginning. Take me through what your upbringing around sports, around baseball was like when you were growing up, and when you kind of knew that you'd be spending your life around this game.
That's a very deep-rooted question that you ask. I always knew that I wanted to be involved in sports. I played baseball all the way through college. And then when I realized that I wasn't going to have the opportunity to play past college, it's kind of when the light bulb went on, probably about my sophomore, junior year, of saying, okay, this is not going to be my future. And I need to find a different path. And that's when I got into the broadcast thing. If you talk to old teammates of mine, whether I was in high school or playing summer ball or even college, they would always tell you, I did an interview the other day, and my neighbor who lived across the street from me when I was a kid, he said, man, he was calling games. He was playing Nintendo back when he was 7, 8 years old. So I think that when you ask my friends and old teammates, I was doing this stuff in the dugout a long time ago. And that's kind of where I got the itch. And then I had an opportunity to fill in 2006 in Rancho Cucamonga, and really doing my first bit of baseball. I'd never done that in college because I was always playing. That's when I really realized that this is the path that I want to get down. And even before that, when I was in college as a junior, the first game I ever called was a softball game. And having the feedback that I got from my professors and the people that I was working with who didn't have a lot of experience, but they said, this is how play-by-play should sound. And even though I was terrible, and I go back and I listen to those old beta tapes, and it's good to go back and listen to that stuff and know where I came from. But that's kind of where the itch came from, doing that softball game and then subsequently doing the baseball games in 2006. And here we are 16 years later and going into year number 7 in the big leagues, which is hard to believe, but it's a fun trip down memory lane and a career path that I've never faltered from, and one that I'm still passionate about today.
So to talk about your time in college at Chapman, when you said you were broadcasting a little bit with softball specifically, is that all that feedback from different people, is that kind of how your time in college like crafted you into, at least obviously not a finished product, but kind of into the broadcaster you are today?
A little bit, Will. I think, I only did 3 games of play-by-play in college. That's it. That's all I did. I did a basketball game, I did a football game, and I did that softball game, and that was it. I did public address for my sophomore year through my senior year. So that was kind of my play-by-play as it is, doing just public address. But I think the way that I shape my preparation and the way that I go about a game now, especially baseball, is when I interned in the spring semester of my senior year, and then subsequently got a job at Fox Sports West and Prime Ticket in Los Angeles. And one of my first jobs was just logging tapes. And I'm sitting there watching a game and then writing down the time code on a sheet of paper. Now it's all digital and everything, and it logs it for you. But it's doing that kind of stuff for the late night sports show, and then moving from logging tapes to editing for the late night sports show. And then, okay, well, one of our PAs is sick. Can you go down to Angel Stadium and run tapes and sit in the truck and learn how things are done in the truck? That was my progression. And then once I graduated and I was done playing baseball and my internship was over, they didn't tell me to stop coming in, and my key still worked to get into the building. So I just kept showing up, and it turned into a full-time job. But it was those games where I'd fill in as a PA at Angel Stadium and getting the opportunity to sit and talk with the announcers, Steve Fisiak and Rex Hudler, and the visiting guys that were in town, where I could, I feel like this is where I want to go with my career. I want to sit here. I want to have this seat. How do I get into this seat? What are the steps that I need to take? And it was Steve Fisiak who said, hey, bring a little cassette recorder, go in the booth next door when you're not grabbing media guides or notes for us or running tape or sitting in the truck, and, call an inning or two, and then give me the tape. I'll listen to it on my way home. And then I'll see you tomorrow for game 2 of the series, and I'll give you some tips. So that's kind of where that was built. And I got my first job somewhat on just some of those recordings that I had. I remember one was a Reggie Willits catch in center field. It's like, wow, all right, Reggie Willits. But you had that big league feel because you're in a stadium with 40,000 people. And it was those experiences and a mentor like Steve Fisiak saying, hey, listen, this is how I got to where I am. I was a mentor for a handful of people. I'm going to pass it on to you, and then you're going to pay it forward moving forward. And then the person that you pay it forward to is going to do that too. But that another story for another time. But at the same time, that's kind of where my style, my preparation, my drive to get into the seat that I'm in right now is kind of born.
I appreciate the Steve Fisiak shout out, a guy that we've had a chance to talk to, and just, you talk about one of the most professional guys in all the game. And, he always talks about being able to pay it forward. And I've made, a commitment that if I do ever get to a position where you guys are in, if any kid asks me to go on a podcast, I'm there in a heartbeat, just because I remember the guys like you, like Steve, that were so generous to us and helping us grow. And guys like you and Steve are just the best. So.
Well, and that's nice to say, but it comes from Steve and even Brian Anderson, who I share wall space with now in Milwaukee. He's the same way. Bob Uecker, of course, he's up there in the higher echelon and my partner now, but he's not doing podcasts. But if there was a kid that was coming through and a young broadcaster, he'd spend 5 minutes with you and talk with you. That's what it's all about. That's what our profession is all about. And I had a lot of help to get into the seat that I'm in. And for me to not provide that help to somebody else who's trying to get into the same seat would be doing the profession a disservice. So if someone paid it forward for me, I got to pay it forward to someone else. And Steve and BA and many others just have been integral in that and in keeping the industry going.
Right. I mean, that's awesome. And before we get a little bit more into baseball, you've also been able to call some college basketball games on Big Ten Network and FS1. So how is calling basketball as well kind of complemented your work during baseball season? And what are some of your favorite memories calling college hoops?
So it's been great to have that opportunity to jump in and do basketball, especially because it's on the television side where all my expertise and where kind of where I came from, sitting in the truck and working at Fox and all that stuff. My background was on the television side. I just happened to luck into doing radio and had to learn that on my own. But the television stuff has been great. I think it makes me a better announcer doing both mediums too. But the crazy thing is that I hadn't done a college basketball game since the one that I did in college, right? So that was in 2004, in the fall of 2004. And then lo and behold, before I got my job with the Brewers, so the offseason of 2014 going to the 15, that's when I started doing games for FS1 and for Fox. I did a couple of games that offseason in the winter. And those were the first games I'd done in 10 years. So, I mean, doing play-by-play for basketball is a whole heck of a lot different than doing it for baseball, but having great analysts and being on television and not on radio gives you an opportunity to slow things down a little bit. But I really enjoy doing basketball. I like doing basketball. It's a different pace. It's a different medium, of course, and working with the great analysts that I've been able to work with over the last 6 years with Fox and Big Ten Network. It really has been great. I love doing basketball. I think it's great. It complements the schedule of baseball, where it gives me, if the Brewers aren't in the playoffs, it gives me October off in a normal year. And then you just jump into the beginning of November and that takes you into spring training. So the schedule works out perfectly. The sport is so fun, and the conferences that I get to cover, the Big East and the Big Ten, are two of the best conferences in all the country. And I'm very lucky to have that opportunity to do it.
So as we do shift to baseball now, like a player would, your career starts in the minors, with your time with the Springfield Cardinals. Obviously, the one that we're always proud of is your time with the Pawtucket Red Sox. So how did those jobs start to really get you into the baseball mindset in terms of a broadcaster and get you ready for a big league job?
Well, in Rancho Cucamonga is where it started, and from 2007 to 2009, and I basically got the job because the assistant general manager was recruited and played for the same college coach that I played for. And that's how I got a job. It's all about connections. It's the stories and all that stuff. And, I had 6 full games of play-by-play experience when I got that job. And then it was, okay, here you go. Here's the play-by-play job. Oh, by the way, you're doing media relations too. Then you're going to run the website. And oh, by the way, we're not on a radio station. So go find us a radio station. And this is how much we have to spend. So, I mean, it was boom, trial by fire. And oh, by the way, we're on the air in 3 months. So good luck, have fun, and get after it. So that was like my baptism right there into minor league baseball. I'm there for 3 years. I got us on a station for the first 2 years of that deal, and nobody could hear it. And I'm very thankful for that, unless you were sitting in the parking lot of the radio station. And it was all Spanish all the time until we hit the air. So I was very thankful that I could do 140 games my first year and nobody heard it. And Twitter was barely even alive at that point. And, nobody was listening to it on the internet except for grandparents and moms and dads and girlfriends and significant others. So I was really thankful for that opportunity because I was not good my first year. And I had a whole year of just trying things out and not have the criticisms of everybody else kind of take me to the next level. So after year number 2, there was another opportunity that I applied for, and I actually got a couple of nibbles and a handful of interviews. And that's kind of when I said, all right, well, maybe I do have a career in this business. And it was really after the 2009 year where ownership changed with the Quakes. Another broadcaster was brought in. I didn't know if I was coming back. And while they were making the restructuring of my job, they brought somebody else in. I applied for another job. We ended up switching, and I got the job in Double-A in Springfield, while he took my job in Rancho Cucamonga. And it was at that point where if I don't get that job in Springfield, or if I don't get that job somewhere else, play-by-play might not have been a career for me. That was a really big crossroads for me to get that job in Double-A, and just another job in general. Because if I don't, then maybe I go back to Fox. I'm a producer or something else. Maybe I'm just a full-time PA or an associate director, whatever I am. It might have gone differently. But getting that job in Springfield and having the St. Louis Cardinals own and operate the team, having an opportunity to go on KMOX when the Cardinals were during the All-Star break. I mean, those are big opportunities where you have so many people listening to you, and great fan bases in Springfield and in St. Louis, that you get exposed to. And then lo and behold, you get the opportunity in Pawtucket, which has been such a pipeline for people to get to the big leagues. But if I don't have that opportunity in Pawtucket or to move on to the major leagues, I'd have been happy being in Pawtucket forever too. It was a great spot. Springfield was a great spot. Rancho Cucamonga was a great spot. Great fan bases, great organizations. And I tell you, I learned so much in my 2 years in Pawtucket, just about your accountability as a broadcaster. And I'll never forget when Mike Tamburro hired me. And my first day on the job, he brought me into his office and he said, "Hey, listen, we're excited to have you. I think everybody in Red Sox Nation is excited to get a chance to know you and get to know your broadcast style. But just know this, you're not on a year-to-year contract. You're not on a month-to-month contract. You're not on a week-to-week contract. You're on a word-to-word contract. So just remember that when you're on the air. Have fun. Don't mess it up." So I always remember that. And I will always take that into every job I ever have. I've done that every game I've ever done. You're on a word-to-word contract. And I thank Mike Tamburro and the Paw Sox for kind of giving me that indoctrination into Red Sox Nation. And they're gonna hold you accountable for everything you say, because they're so passionate. And I learned so much in my 2 years when I was in Pawtucket.
So that obviously led to the job that we get to talk about even more today. January 2015, you get the call. You're about to become the play-by-play voice of the Brewers. Take us through how that opportunity came along and what it's been these first 6 seasons as the voice of a major league team.
Sure. I mean, I'm not the voice of the Brewers, and that's a very nice thing to say, but Bob Uecker is the voice of the Brewers, and he will always be the voice of the Brewers. He has been since year number 2 of their inception. But just to work alongside him is amazing. But the opportunity came up, and after my first year in Pawtucket in 2013, I actually interviewed for the fill-in television job. Ended up not getting it, and then the next year they were looking for someone to fill in for Bob when he didn't travel, and he was only going to do a handful of road games every year. So that was going to end up being my job as a quote-unquote number 3 guy. We had a number 2 guy that was here and who's now in Pittsburgh, but the interview process, the first year, had to sit down and call a game off a video screen, which felt a lot like the entire 2020 season of Major League Baseball, because you're sitting there remotely trying to call a game off a video screen. But I got to know the organization at that point, and they got to know me, and it was a pretty easy process. The next year, where it was just me and one other person for the potential job, they bring me back in. I meet with the same exact people, just for a different job. And the final interview that I had to do was the day before Christmas Eve in 2014. And it was go have dinner with Bob Uecker and his wife in Scottsdale, Arizona. So, okay, man, don't mess this up. Have fun. And you're having dinner with a legend at his place, at his table, where his picture is sitting right next to you. And then you're talking to him face to face. So it was a really, really fun experience for me to do that. And then within 5 minutes of the conversation, his old friend and former owner of the Brewers and former commissioner of baseball Bud Selig walks around the corner at his favorite restaurant down at Charlie's. And oh, by the way, his picture's right next to me too. And when Bob Uecker stands up and says, "Hey, Al," when he's talking to Bud Selig, those guys are tight. He says, "Hey, Al, this is Jeff. He's going to be working with us next year." That's kind of when I found out that I had the job, but didn't officially have the job. So it's go to the bathroom, change your pants, come back, finish up your dinner for the next couple of hours, and have Uecker tell stories and get to know him and his wife. And it's been a great relationship ever since. But that's how the process went. And then I didn't find out that I had the job for another week after that, even though Bob said, "Okay, he's going to be working with us next year. We'll see you next week. And it'll be awesome." But I had to sit on that for about a week until I actually got the job on New Year's Day, 2015. But it was an amazing process. The Brewers have been nothing but outstanding to work for and to be a part of this organization. It's like being a part of a family. And I'm very appreciative of all that they've done for me in my career and to get me to where I am.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as we transition to the current Brewers team, they're in an interesting position, right? This offseason, they squeaked into the playoffs last season as that number 8 seed in a very unique 2020 season. They have a farm system ranked near the bottom of the league. However, they also have the opportunity to potentially capitalize on a very weak NL Central division. I mean, you have the Cubs who are kind of selling off pieces. The Pirates are going to be brutal. The Reds are probably not going to be as good as they were last year. The Cardinals, I guess we'll see. So with lots of potential directions for Milwaukee to go, what route do you see the Brewers going this offseason more generally?
That's a very good question you pose, Will. And I wish I had a crystal ball or a Bob Uecker magic 8-ball that I could rub and be like, okay, this is what they're going to do. And it's going to work out. So I believe in the process that David Stearns and Matt Arnold have put in place over the last 5 years. And it's been great. For the first time in franchise history, the Brewers have been a playoff team for 3 straight years. And it's hard to imagine a team that's been around for 50 years. And this is the first time ever that they've gone to the playoffs in 3 straight seasons. It's an amazing accomplishment. I think the Brewers are in a good place. I think their pitching is really, really strong and very underrated with Brandon Woodruff, Corbin Burns, Josh Hader, Devin Williams, and so many other guys that can be a part of that starting rotation. Drew Rasmussen, who's at the back end of the bullpen. I think that their pitching is very undervalued. The way that the offense is going to be constructed, there's still a lot of moving pieces with that. And the way that the market is moving so slowly, I can see the Brewers doing a lot what they did last year too, which is signing a lot of 1-year contracts or 1 year plus an option year moving forward like they did moving into 2020. They're going to bounce. Christian Yelich is going to bounce back. And he's the linchpin of the whole thing. Lorenzo Cain, more than likely, is going to be back in that starting lineup and in center field every single day. That's a big benefit that the Brewers didn't have after he opted out last year. Ryan Braun is still a question mark. Does he come back? Is there a universal DH? Is there not? These are questions that a lot of National League teams especially are trying to figure out because Major League Baseball hasn't made any sort of announcement on whether there's going to be a DH. Daniel Vogelback comes back, and is he going to play first base every single day? Probably not. Would you like him to be a DH? You sure would. So how do you construct your lineup with a potential DH or without a DH is another question that you got to make up. But I think the Brewers are going to be very shrewd in their moves, not long-term deals. They might add a couple of bullpen pieces. They may be adding a starting pitcher or two, but I think they have some depth in the rotation. You mentioned the farm system, Will, and how it's depleted these days. They made a lot of great deals over the last few years to get them to these back-to-back playoff appearances, and that shreds a farm system. It really does. The Padres, just looking at what they've done over the last week or so, getting Darvish and Snell, they've had a very deep farm system, but it's prospects or suspects. You don't know what those guys are going to do until they prove it in the big leagues. And if you can get a couple of guys that have big league experience and a track record of success, you're going to deal those prospects. You saw it with Mike Moustakas. You saw it with Christian Yelich and making those big deals the last couple of years to go get those players. And that it takes a chunk out of your farm system, but it's getting better. They've had better drafts the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
They do have some nice talent that's coming up, some starting pitching that's in the well, some bullpen guys that are in the well that are going to make it an impact at the big league level the next couple of seasons. It's a division that's up for grabs. The Cubs are the Cubs. Their pitching's not going to be as good. You mentioned that. The Cardinals, I think, are the wild card. Their offense is still going to be pretty good. Do they re-sign Yadier Molina? Do they re-sign Adam Wainwright? Who knows? But they're still going to be a force. The Reds are going to be down. They still have Sonny Gray for the time being. They still have Luis Castillo for the time being. But they're not going to be as good. And the Pirates are rebuilding. So it's a very winnable division. I think the Brewers know that. And it's going to be a lot of fun to be a part of, especially playing against the American League Central too, which is a very, very strong division as your interleague partner for a second straight year.
So you just mentioned one of what became one of the brighter stories in all of 2020, and that was the emergence of a guy like Devin Williams, as you mentioned, who just put up some ridiculous numbers last year. Obviously, the .53 ERA, was a hair under 18 strikeouts per 9, just off the charts. Looking back over the last few years, I talked to a few years ago on a previous podcast that I posted, and back then we were talking about the emergence of Josh Hader. Mm-hmm. Now we're talking about guys like Devin Williams. So how have the Brewers been able to pump out so many high-quality relievers over these past few years? And what do you see as the future for Devin Williams with this organization?
It really has been great to watch the Brewers, especially the pitching that's come out, because this has not been an organization in the past that's been applauded for the pitchers that they bring out. And it's like, okay, well, you got all these offensive players. It's the Bronze and Fielders and Corey Hart and JJ Hardy and all these guys that come through. And those are the guys that have come through. Ricky Weeks, just to name a few from the early 2000s and moving forward, but they're not known for developing pitching. And now you've got Josh Hader. Yes, he came in a trade, but Devin Williams was a second-round pick. Brandon Woodruff, Corbin Burns, Drew Rasmussen, who would have been a first-round pick had he not had Tommy John surgery twice. These are all super powerful arms, and the way that baseball is going, it just feels like these dudes are just letting it rip. And for Devin Williams to do what he did last year with a fastball basically as a secondary pitch, because his changeup was ungodly good. And you just hope that it continues to come back. And the way that he developed the pitch was basically throwing a baseball that looked like a hockey puck with that side spin. You can try and replicate it, and he's trying to teach it to people. But that's just, hey, thank the Lord for striking you down with that beautiful changeup and let her rip. And it really has been fun seeing all these guys come through and just throw gas. And Corbin Burns, after a disastrous 2019, comes back in 2020. He's a Cy Young candidate. Brandon Woodruff gets off to a great start, has a couple of bad innings here and there, but he's an ace in the making. And then you've got like Fire and Ice with Brent Suter, who's as cool as it gets, and with all the off-speed stuff and all of his antics on the mound. It really is fun to watch what the Brewers have been able to do and use analytics and use their pitching lab that still nobody knows what goes on in the pitching lab in Arizona. And I think that's the best kept secret in all of baseball, because guys will come through spring training or there's an injury or they have some sort of mechanical flaw, and they spend a week or two in the pitching lab and they come back and they're different dudes. And it's so fun. Zach Brown, another guy who is yet to make his big league debut. And he's a guy that's going to make an impact in the big leagues at some point. Pitcher of the year 2018, has a down 2019, comes back in 2020 after a couple of weeks in the pitching lab, and he's a different cat. So, I mean, it's whatever they're doing in there, just keep doing it and keep it baseball's best kept secret.
So on the offensive side, after the 2019 season, the Brewers looked like they had an absolute rising star in Keston Hiura. But in the shortened season, like a lot of people, like of course Christian Yelich, as you mentioned earlier, he really struggled. But there were also some concerning marks. He led the league in strikeouts and strikeout rate. His hard contact, after like a ridiculous 45% hard contact rate in his rookie season, dropped nearly 15%. Obviously, it is a short sample, but in year 3, what are you expecting from Hiura in 2021? What are your expectations for him?
Well, I really hope that he comes out of 2020 as a better hitter. Not to say that he wasn't a good hitter. He's a great hitter. He was the most polished hitter in his draft class. But there's a ton of swing and miss, and Craig Counsell talks about it a lot. He since the beginning of his upbringing, he's been a swing and miss guy, and it's especially at elevated fastballs. For whatever reason, the elevated fastball has given him a really tough time, and you saw pitchers just feast on throwing him fastballs up in the zone and more on the inside part of the plate. He feasted on some breaking balls in the outer part of the plate. He can still get to velocity in the lower portion of the strike zone, but there's a lot of swing and miss. And you mentioned the metrics, Will, about he was swinging at pitches in the middle of the strike zone, like not even on the fringes of the strike zone, but right center cut fastballs. He missed more of those over the course of the regular season than anybody that I've seen in a long time. But so did Christian Yelich. So did Javier Baez. So did a lot of great players, all-star, perennial players. I think you just kind of chalk it up to a tough year. He's going to come back. And I think Keston Hiura and Christian Yelich are going to be the linchpins of that Brewers offense moving forward, especially with Kane at the top. You can kind of plug in a couple of other guys, obviously Ail Garcia, and then you figure it out from there. But Keston Hiura is going to hit in the middle of that lineup. He's going to be productive. He's going to be a 25 home run guy over the course of his career. I feel like he'll probably hit near 280, maybe 300. He will strike out. It's going to frustrate people. Strikeouts happen. Everybody strikes out. It's frustrating to watch. Don't listen to our broadcast because Bob Uecker's going to harp on it. He goes, God, I hate striking out. It happens. It happens a lot. I hated striking out too. I hated striking out and going back into the dugout and being frustrated about it. It happens. And people accept that result more often than not these days. But Keston Hiura is going to be a very, very good hitter in the future. And I think he learned a lot about himself and about his approach moving into 2021.
So we've talked about him a little bit. Let's go in depth a little bit more now. Look at the two monster seasons that Christian Yelich had in his first couple of years. He comes in, wins an MVP in 2018. If he doesn't get hurt in that down stretch of 2019, you can make the case that he goes back-to-back and that matchup against Cody Bellinger that year as well. Then you see 2020, very strange year, falls, the average goes down to around 200. Is this just a case of getting a clean slate in 2021, or what do you believe Yelich needs to do to really return himself to MVP form this season?
Take a break, and he's got plenty of break. Listen, man, he's a good hitter. He knows himself more than anybody else, and he was super frustrated last year. And there's no way to get around that. You could tell with his body language. There was a lot of ancillary stuff that was going on with Christian, that off the field, on the field, all of it was just like flush it down the toilet. Where's my toilet? There it is. I have a little toilet. Look, just flush it. Flush 2020. Get over it. Be done with it. Move on. I think that's what everybody needed to do in 2020, and especially Christian Yelich. I think he's going to come back in 2021. I've heard he hasn't had a haircut since the middle of the 2020 season. I'm curious to see what he's going to look like when they show up to camp in Arizona. But I feel like he's going to be a different dude. He's going to have a renewed sense of urgency. He's going to try and get back to it, of course, the way that he had in 2018 and 2019. But you mentioned Cody Bellinger too. He had a down year. Baez had a down year. Rizzo had a down year. Chris Bryant was a totally different dude than he had been in years past. Just chalk it up to an aberration in 2020. You're not going to want to look at it on his baseball reference page, and you'll just kind of look at it and try and Sharpie it out, I think, in the near future for Christian.
We'll see what the hair looks like in spring training, because we did see him a few weeks ago on the Chris Rose finale of Intentional Talk, and it was working. So we'll see how long it is when he gets to spring training.
He's flowing. There's no doubt.
Yeah. So we've talked about a lot of guys have had down years across baseball. From your perspective, do you think that like short abbreviated 3-week spring training where the only thing you're doing is you're playing sim games, which are kind of weird because it's not really scrimmages, it's not really baseball, like, do you think that plays any role in so many guys having a down year, and specifically guys on the Brewers as well?
I think it's this, Will. I think that because the way that spring training went, everybody showed up to camp, everybody was all ramped up. You're going to start the season. and you're building. Everybody has this date in their mind. It's like, okay, here's the start of the season. You're building, and then you shut it down, right? And nobody knows. Nobody knows when you're going to come back. Nobody knows if you're going to come back. There's no communication because nobody has any answers. And then finally, there are a couple of answers that are going on, but then it's just speculation. And then it's, okay, I'm working out, but I'm not building myself. And this is how baseball players, our football players, basketball players, you're building yourself for this date, right? Here's this line in the sand. You got to get to the line in the sand. You know where your body needs to be. You know where your mechanics need to be to get to this line in the sand to where you're going to start. Well, that was so blurry for so many weeks, and then it became months. And then it was, okay, you're going to start here, boom. And maybe your body's not ready. And then you ramp up to that point so quickly that you saw so many different injuries and all these players. And yes, there's the inter squads. Then there's the mentality of showing up and being on the road and being away from your families. And okay, I'm going to get tested every other day. And I'm trying to do this for all my teammates. I'm trying to do this for myself, but I could still do this and contract this virus and get sick, even if I'm doing all the right things. So I got to worry about that. Then I got to worry about everything that's on the field. I got to worry about my family, who's maybe in a different country or maybe in a different part of the United States. There were so many different things that were going on in these guys' heads. And then you saw it with Justin Turner at the end, where he tests positive on the last day of the season. He is so just done with everything that the team wins the World Series, and he's locked in this room and he's like, dude, get me out of here. Get me out of here. I just want to go celebrate with my teammates. I feel fine. Let me just get out and celebrate and let me breathe. And I feel like that's how everything was last year. Nobody could take a breath with all the ramp up. Then it's the body thing, it's the mechanics thing, and then it's the suffocating feeling of not being in your routine. I think that's what had everything to do with 2020, not being in your routine, trying to do something for everybody else and not just yourself. And it was just a suffocating feeling. And once the season ended, I think everybody could let their hair down a little bit, get on what they needed to get on with their lives to a certain extent, and just get ready for 2021, even though everything says that we're going to be on time and you feel like you're going to be on time and you're preparing to be on time. But who knows?
But Jeff, we're talking about like all these guys on the Brewers who had down years and such, but they still turned out a decent season. I mean, they still made the playoffs. I mean, obviously you don't come into the season wanting to be 29-31. I got it, but they were still able to get into the playoffs. It was still a decent year. You wouldn't be that far off the playoffs, especially in the NL Central with that kind of a mark this year. So what does it say about the rest of the team that they were still able to churn out a decent season despite Yelich having a down year and Hira having a down year and injuries here and injuries there? What does that say about the rest of the team?
It says that their pitching was really good and their pitching kept them in a lot of games. And you couldn't say that in a lot of years prior, Will. Their pitching was outstanding last year. That's what kept them in the 2020 season. And had their offense just been a little bit better than mediocre, I mean, you're looking at a team that might win the division, not just eke into a wild card spot. And it took a lot of losses from other teams to get them in. But hey, they were a playoff team. The Astros eked their way in, and they were a win away from going to the World Series. So, and they even played the Dodgers hard in the 2 games of the 3-game series in the wild card round. So, you know, who's to say? Again, their pitching was really, really good. I'm curious to see how pitching is in 2021 because of the shortened season. I'm sure you guys have talked about this a lot on the podcast, because the innings amounts were so low for all these pitchers after being so astronomically high, maybe in years past. You got guys that are barely pitching 100 innings, if that. You know, relievers are throwing 20 innings, 25 innings, maybe 40 innings at a maximum. What are you going to do over the course of 162? You're not going to ask those guys for 80 appearances. You're not going to ask starters to give you 200 innings. It's going to be insane how many different players are used to try and cobble rotations together. It goes back to Major League Baseball making rules. You got to have expanded rosters, I would think, again, for 2021. But again, I just covered a whole like blanket of things right there. But the pitching, to put a bookend on that, was really good for the Brewers last year.
So as we start to wrap up, now we get to talk a little more of the fun stuff. So there's no question what kind of impact Bob Uecker has had on you and your career since you got to Milwaukee. And you obviously told us a story about the first time you met him. You know, you could write a book of, you know, hundreds and hundreds of pages of Uecker stories, but do you have a few favorites, you know, that you can share? Because I know that's there's probably some that need to stay off the podcast, but, you know, are there a few you can share?
Yeah, there's a lot that there's a lot that I can't share. And they're going to stick with me forever. They're never going to be in a book. They're never going to be in a podcast, and they're just going to stick with me. And that's a good thing. I have a lot of great stories, but some of mine are just the two of us hanging out. And, you know, we had an opportunity before we restarted to go fishing. We go fishing once a year, him and myself and Lane. We go fishing. He's a big fisherman. It's been awesome. I should have that picture on me, but it's in the booth of us catching a bunch of big salmon this year and just spending time together. Uke tells great stories, and you know, some of the great stuff about Uke is who he's come in contact with, right? So on a given day, he could come into the booth and start telling you stories about Mickey Mantle. He could come into the booth and start telling you stories about Hank Aaron, or Tim McCarver, or this last year telling great stories about the departed Phil Niekro and Bob Gibson and how they were teammates and the things that they would do in the clubhouse or in the off season. So many great stories about Clete Boyer and Billy Martin. God, he's got good stories about Billy Martin. And then some days he'll just talk about doing Miller Lite ads, right? So he'll just come in and talk about sitting on a bus and Ray Nitschke walks by him, or John Madden walks by him, or Dick Butkus walks by him, or teaching Rodney Dangerfield how to act before he did his movie career instead of just doing stand-up. The Johnny Carson stories. I mean, the life that he has lived is unlike any other person I've ever come across. The acting, the playing career, the broadcasting. He's the only guy that's been able to merge all of those things and be immensely popular with everybody. You won't go anywhere in this city, in this state, in this country, and come across a negative story about Bob. He is so generous with his time. He's so generous with just himself, being around other people. He treats my family like they're his own, and he is just one of the most caring human beings that I've ever come across. And he's going to be 87 later on this month. And he is the youngest 87-year-old, despite having 2 different heart surgeries and beating pancreatic cancer and everything else that he's had to deal with, broadcasting a game with 2 contact lenses and 1 eyeball, and then driving home. That happened in 2018, and I'll never forget it. That's a true story. And to be able to do that kind of stuff and make it sound like nothing is wrong and that everything is right there, it's amazing. He was built to do games in 2020 when there were just nothing but growth lights out at Miller Park and nobody was playing, and he was trying to talk about a game that was taking place in Minnesota. Like he was built for this stuff. And that's what made this last year really special. And it's what's made the last 6 years and going on 7 years so special for me with Bob.
So Jeff, before I let you go, we talked earlier about your experience commentating basketball, specifically for the Big Ten Network. For those listeners, the people who listen to the podcast will certainly know I am a ginormous Rutgers sports fan, specifically. And so obviously right now, Rutgers basketball is very exciting for me. So I have to ask you, Jeff, who do you see coming out on top of the absolute gauntlet that is the Big Ten Conference in basketball this year?
That's a great question. Will, the Big Ten is massive, and there are no giveaway games. I mean, I know Penn State and I know Nebraska, they're down. They're having tough years. Everybody thought Northwestern was going to have a tough year, but they came out of the gate super, super strong. I had their first conference game against Michigan State when they upset them when Michigan State was number 4 in the country. In my mind, it's going to be between Iowa and Wisconsin. I think those are the two teams. I love Rutgers. Steve Peichel has done an amazing job with that program. I love Geo Baker. I love Ron Harper Jr. I think that team is going to make life hell for a lot of teams in the Big Ten Conference. But Iowa and Wisconsin, with those players that are so experienced, Iowa with Luka Garza, he's a Player of the Year candidate, for Wisconsin, who starts 5 seniors that have been with the program forever. Their depth is going to get tested. I think those are the two teams that are going to really factor at the end of the year. Michigan State, I think they're pretty good. Michigan is off to their great start. But Iowa and Wisconsin, I think it's going to come down to them, and it's a crapshoot after that. I wouldn't be shocked if you had 10 teams in the Big Ten make it to the tournament this year. Honestly, 10 teams.
Does that make you feel better, Will?
Yeah. No, I mean,
he was confident anyway. Let's be honest. We knew that.
Will wanted me to go, yeah, Scarlet Knights. Yeah,
no.
I
I wanted a serious answer. I wasn't just fishing for Rutgers compliments, although
they're good, man. I tell you what, I love the rack too, and I hope fans can get back to the seat, get back in the stands at the rack too. Because I remember doing the one time I've been to the rack, it was late night, a 9 p.m. tip-off against Northwestern. It was an overtime game that they ended up winning. It was like 2 or 3 years ago. And it was as great an atmosphere as I've been a part of. It was so fun. It was raucous. Like, it reminded me of going to a game at Fenway a little bit, because the people in the stands knew the family members and everything. They were getting on the Northwestern guys. It was awesome.
Yeah. No, I mean, the stadium itself is so old. It like looks so clunky, but
it's great.
It
feels like you're playing basketball in a barn. It's so cool.
It's awesome.
Well, I know that makes Will feel good about his chances heading into the tournament this year. We're obviously hoping for the best with the Brewers. But, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on. It's been so much fun to talk to you again. Hope the family's doing well, staying safe, and very much looking forward to hearing you back on the air for year 7.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much, guys. Great job. Keep up the great work, okay?
Hey guys, this is Hard 90 alum Javid Blake. Just wanted to give a big shout out to Tim, Will, and Josh on reaching the 50 episode mark. It's such a great accomplishment, and to think that no more than a year ago, this was just sort of an idea, and the amount of guests and recognition you guys have gotten for your show over the past year has been nothing short of incredible. So congratulations on 50 episodes, and here's to another great 50. Now let's throw it back inside episode 50 of Hard 90.
And a huge thank you to our guy, Javid Blake, for throwing us back inside episode 50 of the Hard 90 podcast. Again, a huge thank you to Jeff Levering for joining us. Another fantastic interview we were able to feature on this episode. So, Will, start with you. What was your big takeaway from our interview with Jeff? Was it the big Rutgers chant at the end, or was it something baseball related?
Well, I will say I did appreciate the Rutgers talk at the end. However, I think the talk about Bob Uecker is it was really entertaining. To listen to some of his stories about Bob Uecker. I mean, Bob Uecker is a legend in the world of baseball broadcasting. So I think more than any baseball takeaways, I mean, just hearing what it's like to work with Bob Uecker on a pretty much a daily basis, it was really interesting to hear. And I'm glad that Jeff was able to share those stories with us. And then on a baseball side, it was interesting to hear. Just a lot of talk about the Brewers pitching. I think it almost kind of slipped my mind how good the Brewers pitching actually was, despite the fact that maybe it didn't have the depth that other teams did have. And so that was really able to carry them to a playoff appearance. So I think the discussion about the pitching was interesting, but I did love the Bob Uecker talk.
You got to give a huge tip of the cap to Jeff for the career that he's built. You know, he mentioned it. Coming out of college, he'd only done 3 play-by-play games in his entire career, in his entire life, and is now about to enter his 7th season as a play-by-play voice of a major league franchise, which is still mind-boggling to me. But that shows the work ethic, and that shows the talent that a guy like Jeff Levering has had and has been able to build such a career as he has. And in terms of the baseball side, I mean, again, you talked about the Uecker stories, which are absolutely amazing, but just being able to cover a lot of really fun Milwaukee teams. You know, again, mentioned it, 3 straight playoff appearances, them looking to make it 4 in 2021. And that could be a legit possibility if they do get the pitching depth that they need. And obviously you get the bounce back season from your MVP candidate, Christian Yelich. But what are you looking at for this team in 2021? We talked about, Cleveland earlier, what you're going to expect from that division. That's been really kind of a weird run the last couple of years with the Central. I think it's even weaker in the NL Central, and that you could throw a dart at anywhere that's not Pittsburgh, and you'd be totally content with whoever's going to come on top on that division. Do you think this is another year that the Brewers could get back to the top, win that division, or do you at least see them at least getting back to October?
Well, I don't see them as a wild card, just because I think in my opinion, the two wild cards are pretty clearly, in my opinion, barring any sort of expanded playoff that we don't know about yet. But I mean, in the current playoff system, I think the two wild cards are pretty clear to me, which is whoever loses the NL West between Padres, Dodgers, and whoever loses the NL East between the Mets and the Braves. So, do I see the Brewers getting into October as a wild card? No, I don't. However, do they have a chance of winning the NL Central? Sure. I think the Cardinals are the best team in the NL Central, but I mean, it's not really saying a whole lot. I mean, the Cubs really going on a downhill trajectory. They're definitely entering a rebuild. You can definitely tell. The Reds are kind of continue to subtract this offseason, and it remains to be seen what they're going to do with Sonny Gray. I think the Reds will be in the mix, though, because it's not like they're going against a lot of other good teams. I think the Brewers, not only do they need a bounce back from Christian Yelich to really to potentially win the division, they need guys like Keston Hiura to really step up this year and go back to maybe not completely what he was in 2019, but at least sort of get close to getting back there. So I think with the bounce backs, I think Brandon Woodruff's excellent, but they need him to stay healthy for the whole year. And if those things happen, I think they'll be right in the mix. I don't know if I'd classify them as the favorite, but I think they will be in the mix.
You got to imagine, a guy like Christian Yelich is not going to let a season like that deter his career. Again, 2018 NL MVP. Had he not gotten hurt at the tail end of 2019, probably looking at a guy that wins back-to-back MVPs. We know the talent's there. We know the work ethic is there. We know that this is a guy that's going to be primed for a bounce back in 2021. And I really want to see this team, whether it's going out and finding a 3 or 4 on the free agent market, but just finally getting the depth that they need. They're obviously not in a financial position to go get a Trevor Bauer. We know that. But if they could just get some depth behind guys to pair with Brandon Woodruff and Corbin Burns, who's obviously terrific in 2020, if they can kind of start to build at least some depth and at least build a 1 through 5 that you're confident in trotting out there every day. You're not going to have a rotation like the Mets have, or one of these top teams in baseball, especially in their league. The National League, there's some really good rotations that are going to be back in the playoffs in 2021. You're not going to have one of those because every one of them has at least one ace, if not 2. You are going to have to build around Burns, build around Woodruff, and at least build a durable 1 through 5 to get yourself back in position to win this division. And again, with that offense starting to heat back up with Yelich, hopefully having another great year, they'll certainly be in the mix. Let's continue on with the festivities. And we know that through 50 episodes, again, we've had so much to be thankful for in what we've been able to accomplish so far through 50 episodes. And a lot of that has to go to the brilliant people that have been able to come on, give their time, and share their stories and insight with us. And a huge thank you to all of our guests that have joined us so far through 50 episodes. And I wanted to take a chance to acknowledge all of them that have joined the show so far. And you've heard from 3 of them today on our episode throws. Jack Halstead, Max Milstein, Javik Blake. Enjoyed a lot of your time on the show, and so thankful that you've been able to give your time and give your insight on the show. And then for all of our guests that have joined us, 2020, a lot of these coming in. And I know that I'm very thankful because I think that if not for a pandemic, if not for something that really would have just locked people in their houses, again, I am fully ready to just wipe 2020 away and get the big erase that you had in second grade out and erase that permanently. But we were so lucky in 2020 that we were able to get the experience to talk to so many amazing people throughout this incredible game. And it starts back at the beginning with Kevin Burkhardt, our first guest, and so many other incredible people since then. Dr. Charles Steinberg, Lars Anderson, Dante Bichette Jr., Jeff Arnold, Chris Cotillo, Steve Fiziak, Drew Goodman, Ken Korak, Jim Lucas, Don Wardlow, Jose Garcia, Jacinto Arredondo, Victor Rojas, Dan Schulman, Tom McCarthy, Alana Rizzo, Dr. John Stout of Hofstra, Dr. Rich Perzer of Hofstra, Bob Kendrick, Trisha Whitaker, Shane Barclay, Jeff Plimpton, and then obviously in episode 50, Dave Sims and Jeff Levering. I can't even begin to imagine what this has been like. It's still, I pinch myself that we've been able to share so many incredible stories with so many incredible people. So all of our guests that have come on, so much love and appreciation for each and every one of you. Can never thank you enough. And you've built what I'm so proud of in Hard 90 so far.
For sure. I mean, it's
tough.
It's kind of it's really warm. It makes me feel very warm to know that there's so many people out there, despite the fact that we've had some pretty big names on this podcast, that people are so willing to really at least pay it forward or pay it back in some ways. That I mean, at the end of the day, like, we're college students. Like, I mean, that's the reality of it. And for people, I mean, who are so high profile, like Dan Schulman and Victor Rojas and other guys like that. I mean, the fact that I'm sorry if I'm missing anybody, that's not intentional. Just the first two names that came to mind. But you're looking at guys that obviously you wouldn't blame them if they didn't feel like coming on to them, which is like another just random baseball podcast, but they didn't, and was able to share some expertise and stories and stuff with that with us. And that I'm super thankful for. I'm super thankful to everyone who's come on the podcast. I mean, I've had an absolute blast through 50 episodes, and it's not going to stop here. So I'm looking forward to continuing to bringing people on, talking about baseball, all and everything in between. And again, just super thankful to all the guests who, I mean, I've looked up to, listening to baseball games for a while, or reading stories, or whatever it ends up being. And I'm thankful that they've taken some time out of their day, a half hour out of their day, 45 minutes out of their day, to come on to this podcast and talk about whatever they want to talk about. So really, truly thankful for all of that.
1000%. And, what this shows, again, we have so much gratitude for everyone that's come on. And again, I think Will hit it on the head that we are, just no matter what we might think we are. Well, we might think this is a pretty good show. I would like to think this is a pretty good show, but to a lot of people, it's three kids sitting in their bedrooms, in their basements, wherever, not at school, talking about baseball for the heck of it, because they love this game and want to grow their careers as broadcasters. And luckily, this is what I love about our great game, is none of these guys had to do this, but none of these people had to do this. But we are just so lucky that the baseball community is just made up of so many incredible people that are just so generous with their time and want to help you grow in whatever way they can. I've gotten a couple really nice messages from some Hard 90 alums this week, and it just further incites that in my head, that these are just incredible people that we've been lucky enough to get to talk to for just a little bit, and to pick their brains, to give them a platform to share their stories. And I look forward to continuing that for the next 50 episodes as well.
Yeah, it's been a crazy past year, and we've had a lot of high moments on this podcast, and I'm looking forward to what 2021 will bring for the Hard 90 podcasts. And I hope that we'll be able to go to a baseball game in 2021. Crossing my fingers of that, to see the Red Sox and Mets. But just a huge mazel tov to everyone who's been involved in this podcast.
Yeah. And, I gave my whole 2020 look back in episode 48 when we celebrated the holidays. But, just looking back, I came to college, had my quick little cup of tea in the podcast industry before, doing my little show in high school. And I knew when I got back to college that this was something I wanted to re-jumpstart and fall back in love with. And this show has allowed me to do that. And it's been so rewarding for me too, to watch the fun that you guys have had, because if I remember correctly, neither one of you had done a podcast coming into college. And look where both of you are now. Will's co-hosting an indie ball podcast. Josh has obviously made his mark with Hockey Fanatic. They hit episode 50 last week. To watch you guys fall in love with this platform as well has been really rewarding for me. And, obviously I'm really appreciative that you guys have been here for this entire ride.
Appreciate that, man. I mean, at the end of the day, you're the one doing the editing and the stuff behind the scenes. So I can't thank you enough. But I mean, yeah, I mean, podcasts are fun. I mean, you can really kind of like, of course, we all love WRHU, but at the end of the day, you have time constraints and you have a very pretty narrow window that you gotta talk in, and podcasts are very free flowing, and you could kind of take it wherever you want to go. So that's
you can be as creative as you want, really, with a podcast. That's what's so cool about it. And I think that's why podcasts are doing so well in the sports media industry right now.
For sure.
This is the future that we're going to continue. We don't just hit episode 50 and that's it. We're just going to kind of coast until we graduate. No, this is just the beginning. And a new chapter will open when we record episode 51. A new chapter is going to open when we record episode 51. The best, I believe, is still yet to come. And that's even with the incredible milestones that we've hit through 50 episodes, the incredible stories that we've told through 50 episodes. What is to come is going to be incredible. And again, we get to cover another awesome season. Again, fingers crossed that we're starting on time and in a safe manner as we play through, what I hope is the final stages of the pandemic. I'm hoping that, by the time that the playoffs roll around, we're not having to have a bubble and we can get back to having roaring crowds in their home ballparks, watching their team win a World Series championship and being there to celebrate it. And that we didn't really get to do that in 2020. And I am confident in that moving forward. I'm confident in the future of this show. We have so much more to come. And I'm just, again, over the moon of what we've been able to accomplish so far. And I know that our future is still very bright.
Agreed. I'm very, very excited for the future, to say the least.
Very, very, very excited and looking forward to it.
With that, we're about 5 weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting. We're starting to get ready. Back to Arizona, back to Florida. Get the Grapefruit League ready. Get the Cactus League ready. It's just about that time for baseball to return. But in the meantime, enjoy everything that's going on. For Josh, I know he's excited. Hockey returning on January 13th.
Yes,
for
sir.
both of you, best of luck to your teams as well. I guess my team too, but big matchup next week.
Yeah.
I know there might be some animosity on the show coming up with the Bruins and Devils playing. Obviously, the basketball's back basketball's fully back in swing. The NFL playoffs getting ready to go. It's a great time of year, and while we get ready for baseball, we hope that you continue to tune into our show to get your baseball fix. With all sports really getting back in the swing of things, and baseball starting up just around the corner. But again, to everyone that's listened, to everyone that's offered their support, to everyone that's helped spread the show, to everyone that has come on, given their time as a guest, cannot thank you enough for everything that you have given to this show, because none of this happens with just the three of us. There's been so many helpful hands at every corner, and I'm so appreciative, as are Will and Josh, for everything that this show has become through 50 episodes, and a huge tip of the cap for whatever's to come in the next 50. So looking forward to that. So that will conclude episode 50 of the Hard 90 podcast here through Required Radio at Hofstra University. For Will Thompson, for Josh Linsenberg, I'm Tim Crowley. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you for whatever comes ahead.